We're going to be, apart from carrying on the discussion about economics, we're also going to be looking at about who should be allowed to vote, because obviously this is in light of the news today. I mean, it's not really new news, but it's in the news today.
You're talking about IQ tests here, you're talking about age, I presume.
Well, absolutely. This is it, you see. It's about the fact that 16, 17-year-olds will be given the right to vote, and we're going to say, really, who should be allowed to vote?
And that surely plays right into the hands of Reform. Reform have just reduced their membership fee for youngsters, and you know, there is a view that those Reform voters now are, you know, youngsters are going to be more Reform voters. Anyway, I've got to go. I'm being chased out the door. I'm back tomorrow. Merry Christmas. Phil Dave next.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good evening to you. It has just gone 2 minutes past 10 o'clock on Monday, the 23rd of December 2024. It's, what is it, Christmas Eve, I guess, isn't it? Yeah. So Christmas is nearly upon us, which must mean, well, only one thing, really. That means a total change in lineup of presenters here on the home of common sense. And I'm afraid that The Late Show is no exception, because it means that instead of the sensational Petri Hoskin this evening, you're lumbered with me, but I very much hope that you'll keep me company all the same, because that's certainly what I plan to do with your good self. Yes, this is Phil Dave in for Petri with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. And you will notice that even though the great lady herself is not here this evening, that there will be certain familiarities about the show. So let me take you through what is coming up, because believe me, we've got an awful lot to pack in over the next 3 hours. So I very much hope you will stick with me as much of that as you possibly can. Well, coming up a little later this hour, we are going to be getting all of the latest sporting news with Alex 3 Lions Irons. Now, I have to tell you that I don't know who gave Alex his nickname, but I've got a bone to pick with him, right? Because, right, okay, oh, I've just realised apparently it's Adam, who's one of the producers on this show. And the reason why is because written down, it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Alex 3 Lions Irons. Now try saying that out aloud, live on air, and I'm going to level with you. It's not easy. So I know I'm going to trip up at some stage of that, and I can only apologise in advance when I do. However, he'll be here later, giving us all of the latest sporting news. And got quite a few stories, actually, to get through this evening with Alex. So we'll be looking forward to catching up on what he has to say. He'll be here at about 20 to 11 this evening, so that's a little later on. Also later this hour, by the way, Andy Twelves, yes, him from the Institute of Chartered in IT, he's going to be here to give us some technology news. Now, regular viewers and regular callers and listeners to Petri will know that often I can be heard doing some of that technology stuff. So I'm really looking forward to, for once, actually being the one to ask the questions and to dig a little deeper into the stories that he's chosen out, including, by the way, and I'm so looking forward to this, because this is right up my strata. I want to understand what it is that AI is going to do to potentially improve the world of whiskey. Now, I have to tell you, I don't see how it can, personally. But apparently there is some story that Andy's got up his sleeve that is going to tell us why it is that AI will revolutionise the world of whiskey. I already like the world of whiskey, so to be honest with you, I don't see how it can be improved. But anyway, just saying, that's what's happening. Then at 11 o'clock this evening, we're going to be doing the front pages. So we're going to be looking at Tuesday's front pages for you. And I'm going to be joined by the friend of the station, Efe Akintade, for that. So we really look forward to that, because Ebbs is such a top chap. He's always full of opinion and always gets you thinking. He's the kind of person who offers you an opinion that you might not necessarily have thought of about a story, but he doesn't do it in a way that is so typical and so synonymous with this day and age. You know, when you get someone who comes across and they always try and possibly either put you down a bit or possibly try and patronise you or probably try and say to you, no, you're wrong, I'm right. He's nothing like that. He just offers a really clear and concise and, I'd say, really educated answer to maybe something you might not have thought of. So stretch your imagination, stretch your mind, look forward to what Ebbs has to say at just after 11 o'clock. And then at midnight tonight, some things never change. It's the phone-in hour. It's the only hour throughout the live broadcast day here on Talk where it is entirely dedicated to you. So you will get the chance to have your say and join in the conversation. Now, I'm going to go into this in more detail a little later on, but the question we're going to ask you is who should be allowed to vote, and also should there be any terms and conditions associated with people who have the right to vote. So who has the right to vote? And you can get in touch with all the usual ways. 0344 499 1000 is the main number you need to know. Don't forget those calls, by the way, will be charged at national rate. But you can call that number. You can also send us a WhatsApp message, and you can also send us a WhatsApp voice message as well. 0344 499 1000. Get your calls in nice and early. Midnight hour often gets very busy, so we want to make sure that you have put your name down as soon as you possibly can. And then 87222, make sure you start that message with the word talk if you want to send us a traditional SMS message. And of course, on Twitter, it's at Mr. Phil Dave or at talkTV. Loads of ways to get in touch. Right, let's get into this, because today that we heard that the UK economy is, well, it's not really doing as well as it should do, really, all things considered, especially as we've been told that Labour are going to be this great saviour of ours to put the economy right after years of abuse by those nasty, nasty Tories. Well, it turns out that it's not going so well either for Labour. Who'd have thunk it? Well, look, I'm going to level with you, right? I'm always, if I'm nothing else, I'm very, very honest. And I have always said that when it comes to things like the economy, I have a rough idea of what I'm talking about. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but fortunately, we know a chap who is, and I'm absolutely delighted to say, and I'm honoured, actually. I'm not just saying it. I've known this chap many, many years. He's a legend in the world of broadcasting, because David Buik, who's markets commentator at Aquis Exchange, joins us live this evening to help us unpick a little. So first and foremost, David, I do mean that. What a treat to be on air with you, sir. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. First and
pleasure's all mine, Phil. All mine.
You're too kind. I need to help you. Well, I basically need you to help someone like me understand, OK? Let's start with the real basics, right? And this might sound like a really obvious question. Why should we care about the state of the economy? Even if that sounds like an obvious question, I want to know why you believe that is the case, that everyone should take an interest in it.
I think it's a lot to do with the well-being of a family. I think it's a lot to do with enjoying your job. I think it's a lot to do with contributing to the community and also contributing to the expansion of the United Kingdom in terms of world achievement. Now, that sounds very grandiose, and it's not meant to. And the problem with the inheritance of the current Labour government of an economy that wasn't in very good shape, one of the reasons that Rishi Sunak wanted to call the election in July, he was wrong in terms of his judgment, but I understood why, because it did look like the economy was going to do pretty well. And when Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, together with Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, put together the budget with the help of the Treasury, the Office of Budget Responsibility, and they went for growth, and everybody, regardless of political persuasion, must have been really happy with the message, because I want my children and my grandchildren to do really well. I would prefer it happened under another administration, but we don't have one. And we're going to have this administration for probably another 4.5 years. But they forgot, when they put their budget together, 3 absolutely vital words: confidence, stability, and sentiment.
Now, can you just say, when you say confidence, that's to do with the markets themselves, isn't it? So that's more about...
No. It's more to do, Phil, with actually the way people set about the task of their job.
Oh, I see. I beg your pardon. So the confidence in the conviction of what they're doing. I beg your pardon. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And in point of fact, to deliver confidence, stability and sentiment, you need the government of the day to create an environment whereby small, medium-sized enterprises, and trust me, whatever you read in the papers, and they're pretty downbeat at the moment, when it comes to things like technology and small and medium-sized enterprises, we are numero uno, almost in the world. And one of the reasons why we never see these people come for public quotation is they're nicked by the private equities, normally the United States. And the reason that they do that, because these companies of ours in the United Kingdom, they're rated at 30% higher in the United States of America for the same business than they are over here. And that's because the international community doesn't hold, currently, the United Kingdom in the highest regard in terms of acquiring assets, which will increase and multiply as much as, say, perhaps the United States. Now, to draw an analogy on this is that though he may be a highly controversial appointment, Donald Trump has created an atmosphere whereby people believe that the economy is going to go gangbusters. And those people on Friday who listen to financial news will see that the main economists reckon that the US economy would grow at 2.8%. Wrong, 3.1%. And that's because the attitude of mind is very, very positive.
So that's really interesting, because actually I have to say that, sort of, even speaking as someone who's always, I have taken an interest in economics. I don't want to pretend that I'm a complete novice, but I am very aware there are plenty of people who listen and watch talk, and as a result of it, they might be forgiven for not necessarily having as much of an interest. So I find it fascinating that, sort of, for me, I don't really remember the last time that we had a chancellor in power who I felt knew what they were doing and that I could really trust them. So if you, and I think it's very easy to forget as well, we actually had about 5 chancellors under the last Tory government. So, and let's be honest, they didn't all do a very good job. You know, what are we looking for in our chancellor? What is it that the market or we, the people, are supposed to look for in our government, in our chancellor?
Well, in my lifetime, which is, I'm afraid, is far too long, we've had 2.5 fantastic chancellors. The last chancellor that we had that was really good was Gordon Brown. And Gordon Brown, regardless of your political persuasion, for the first 2 or 3 years of the Blair administration was superb. Because he had one focus in his mind, Phil, and that was for Labour to get re-elected. And that was absolutely essential. So he had policies which created work, created jobs, put more money in people's pockets, and all in all, hardly surprising when the election came round. I can't remember exactly when it was, but let's say it was 2002. They won by another landslide. And before that, you go back to Geoffrey Howe and Nigel Lawson, who understood what it was. And they put, particularly Nigel Lawson, obviously Thatcher orientated, was he put in taxation for people who spend money, not who earn it. So when I first arrived at work in 1962, 83% tax was payable above about £3,000. And that came down, what we call the surtax, in 84 to 60% and down to 40% in 1986. They were fundamental reasons. Now, what could Mrs. Reeves have done for the economy to create this growth? I mean, they did what they call the smoked salmon run at lunchtime brilliantly. There was Tulip Siddiq, there was Jonathan Reynolds for business, there was Mrs. Reeves as Chancellor of the Exchequer, status quo, and of course Prime Minister-elect Starmer. And they went around the City of London, they went around all the fund managers, they went around all the big business, and they got them all on side. And I have to give them 11 out of 10 for their efforts. But blow me down, they talked some nonsense about a black hole which didn't really exist to the side that they're in, and they just throttled confidence and stability.
Do you think the reason for that is because that they were just looking for... I mean, look, obviously I know you don't speak on behalf of the government, I get that completely, but I'm just more asking for your expert opinion here. Do you think it was a case of that they saw an opportunity to say, well, look, the last government, the Tories made such a mess and everyone knows it, which we do. You know, I don't think you had to be an economist to realise that the last government didn't exactly make this country boom by the time they left office, right? I think most of us can appreciate that. Do you think it was a case, though, that what they did was they thought this was a golden opportunity, we'll blame the last government, we'll pull out this ridiculous ballpark figure that most people are going to be stupid enough to believe? Well, to be honest with you, I don't know one person who believes it. And then they'll just say, right, this will be our excuse, this will be our golden ticket to do almost whatever the heck we like.
Phil, I think you're right. My point is it wasn't necessary to do that. Everybody knew that the Conservatives have made a Horlicks of it. But I still maintain and believe we've never got over the banking crisis of 2008-9. Whatever anybody tells you, we have not got over it.
How do we know that, by the way? Because that's really interesting, because to a lot of people, they might say, oh, that was so long ago, surely we must be over it by now.
Well, you go and look at a graph of all the major banks in this country, NatWest, Barclays, HSBC, probably the last slight exception, Lloyds, their share price until 2024, when they've all had a magical year, has been disgraceful, absolutely awful. And one of the reasons for that was that George Osborne, when he was Chancellor, and the government of the day, because of the banking crisis, made the banks increase their capital tenfold in order to do the same amount of business they were doing before. And when you've got zero interest rates, which was nonsense for so many years, I mean, why we had 0.25 to 1%, just doesn't make any sense at all. And we were, you know, very, very frugal in the way that was allowed to happen. And that has been a seriously damaging effect. And you have to blame not only Labour, but the Conservatives for the fact and remains of not doing something about taking quantitative easing down. That was very inflationary. One of the reasons we got to inflation 11%. And
of course, quantitative easing, for those who don't know, it's basically the printing of money, isn't it? It's almost
Correct.
like just saying we're running out of money, so let's print some more.
No, you're 100% right. And then, of course, the cost of COVID, £400 billion.
Well, I don't know about you, David, but I'm sorry, I have major suspicions about this. I know a lot of people do, but I can't help but think that the timing was absolutely perfect. Now, I know there are going to be people who are going to turn around and say, well, hang on a second, it was a disease. How on earth could the government time this? But it is absolutely extraordinary, the response that they chose to offer as a result of the pandemic, when if you consider that we'd only just paid off the war debt, you know, so
Correct.
Basically this country was as good as debt-free and could potentially, and not as good as, you know what I mean, the war debt was obviously the biggest one. I know that there are other debts, I get that, but the point being as good as to getting us to the point where we were going to be in a really strong position to actually maybe even start, possibly, dare I say, start paying off some other debts and being in a really strong position. However, for whatever ridiculous reason, the government thought, well, actually, we need to spend an awful lot of money. They just started turfing billions and billions into the COVID response. And was that by design or was that stupidity?
No, we need to analyse that. I mean, what Rishi Sunak, who got literally 2 weeks' notice, did with the various schemes that they had, we had full employment. That was a miracle. What was unacceptable was the waste of money on PPI and the contracts that were given out to people who probably shouldn't have had them. And that was several £100 million, if not even more. And there will be...
Though I think it is worth mentioning, though, of course, as much as you're absolutely right, that was unacceptable, I think it was very much off the back of a time where we didn't know how spreadable, if you like, it was without wearing a face mask. Now, I know there are plenty of people, especially those who listened to this station and phoned in and interacted, who said that the face masks, what an absolute waste of time, didn't like them at all of that. We don't need to go down that route, we know that already. The point is that I suppose that it was a reaction at a time when we didn't know how much PPE we were going to need, was it?
No, we didn't, but it was the way that it wasn't properly, what's the word I want? It wasn't properly audited. Why did certain people get the contracts? Maybe they deserved to. But we were left with a sentiment that perhaps contracts were given out to people who shouldn't have had them. And my point is, Labour, I mean, if Labour had been in during the COVID, we'd be in a terrible state of disrepair, because if you recall, Sir Keir Starmer wanted to keep us locked up for ages.
Oh, yes. He absolutely, he voted against the idea of relaxing lockdown. So, yeah.
It's well done, Rishi Sunak, for getting us out of jail in terms of full employment. And there were some mistakes made. There's no question of any doubt about that. But unfortunately, it was all the other stuff that came off that gave the government of the day a very poor bill of health.
Well, I suppose, David, then, because unfortunately time is rapidly going against us here, so just need to literally just to summarise where we find ourselves today in terms of the reports that suggest that the state of the economy is not quite where we wanted it to be or what we're expecting it to be potentially. Are you, A, surprised by what you have seen in terms of the numbers, in terms of the reaction, and B, is there any hope that maybe things will get better in 2025? I know that's a massive prediction to ask you.
I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed, because it wasn't necessary to come up with the taxation, which is inflationary and very inflationary. We've just got through the most horrendous period of inflation, and we've still got energy costs that are still higher than anywhere else in the Western world, pretty much. And all I've got to say is that they could have found other ways of taxing things. No, we needed to up taxation. I don't care what anybody's party political thoughts are. But if you stifle the opportunity to create growth, you're not thinking. So I'm going back to the final thing before I bid you a very good night, is to confidence, stability and sentiment. If the government don't see that, we've got no chance. And I beg of them to give the opportunity to our small, medium-sized enterprise. We don't make money out of people like ICI in the old days and the modern days like BP and Shell and all these huge companies. But we make money out of creativity. And you know what, Phil? We're really good at it. But people have lost confidence and people are laying people off and people say, oh, you know, I'm not sure I really want to do that at the moment because the market sentiment's not very good. The government got it in their hands. And if they want to entice investment into this company, make it worth their while. And I bid you good day, sir.
Well, David Buik, one thing is for sure, you instill confidence in us, sir. Thank you so much for joining me this evening to discuss that. And that, of course, is David Buik, who's markets commentator at Aquis Exchange. This is the home of common sense. The discussion continues next here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good evening to you. It is 25 minutes past 10 o'clock on this, the 23rd of December, Christmas Eve, I think we're going to go with. It's affectionately dubbed anyway. A couple of messages have come in already, by the way, so this is very nice. This is from Ian, who says, knowing that you, Phil Davies, in for Petrie has made my night. Happy Christmas and Happy New Year. That is exceptionally kind of you. Thank you very much. I promise I'm not going to read too many messages that gush, primarily because they won't come in. But if they do, I'm very grateful, I'm very flattered. And this one from Kevin says, hi, Phil. You look very smart this evening. This air of surprise, it shouldn't really be, because I have to do something to draw attention to myself, you see. He says, hi, Phil. You're very smart this evening and great to see you hosting a show because you are a man of great common sense. Kevin in Southampton. Well, Kevin, that's exceptionally kind of you. I do want to reassure everyone else that may be listening that I did not ask any of these people to message in, but I'm very grateful and very flattered all the same. 87222, start your message with the word talk if you want to text. If you want to send a WhatsApp, though, it's 0344 499 1000. And actually, I tell you that number with very good reason, because after midnight this evening, it's the phone-in hour, and this is essential because you are a massive part of that. It's going to be very, very important to me that you are a part of the programme this evening. So let me explain what we're going to be talking about after midnight tonight, because I don't know whether or not you saw this news that was sort of in the papers today, that the right to vote, this is not new news, by the way, but it is in the papers all the same. The right to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds is going to be included in an elections bill next year. So this is according to the Commons leader. It's sort of like, if you like, suggested yesterday. So this is Lucy Powell, who said that the government would likely bring forward legislation in the next parliamentary session, which will include Labour's manifesto to pledge to lower the voting age to 16 years old. Now, you see, here's the problem I have with this, because I think the truth is that actually I'm not convinced that people who've got the right to vote now should have the right to vote. And I don't mean everybody, but there are some, let's be honest. But see, the truth is, right, that as much as I totally understand this will shock some people, and they're not going to be very impressed with that, because it's quite a controversial thing to say, but I believe the reason for that is that there are some people who don't realise how powerful their vote is, OK? The truth is that a vote can be life-changing. Now, it can be life-changing in maybe quite a good way, but it can also be life-changing in an horrific way, right? It can be the case that some people will really have their lives devastated by just someone's vote. Now, you're going to say, but that's ridiculous. It's one person out of millions of people. How is that possible? But you know what I mean. You know full well as I do, that it could be a case that just it needs just enough to tip it over the edge in one party's favour or another. And as you know, it has a knock-on effect. The first past the post ultimately means that if the right number of votes are cast to, shall we say, the right areas, I know that that's what annoys a lot of people, because it's not just the votes that count. I get that. We're not here to talk about whether or not the electoral system in that sense is broken. We know there are plenty of us who believe that the first past the post is not the best voting system. And we also know that there are some voting systems that are not so great either, but some people want to see them. I get all that. It's fine. Forget that. What I'm talking about is the danger of a vote. I think people vote sometimes without fully appreciating what their vote means. And as a result of it, I reckon that their vote can be quite damaging. Exactly the same way you would never allow someone to drive a car without giving them a test first, I'm saying that you should never allow someone to vote without giving them a test first, because it is life-changing, potentially to millions of people. And I want people to understand the power of the votes. Don't even get me started on what I think of people who can't be bothered. Honestly, I am well aware that there are people who are not inspired by some of the options. I get that completely. But to not vote, to me, to my mind's eye, is just daft, honestly. So please, please, join in this conversation because I think it's a really good one and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number you need to get in touch with. Don't forget, you can't just call that. You can also send us a WhatsApp message on that as well. I'd love to get your WhatsApp messages on. And you can also send a voice note to it if you would rather. So loads of ways in which you can get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Text 87222, start your message with the word talk. And obviously, by the way, I should say, if you don't start your message with the word talk, it disappears off into the ether and it'll be a total waste of time. So just make sure that if you are texting on that number, start the message with the word talk, 87222. And I should say that also that the texts are charged at one standard network rate message. And also you can tweet as well. So it's at Mr. Phil Dave and at talkTV. Loads of ways to get in touch. Don't waste your opportunity to talk. Never mind vote. Coming up next is Tech News with Andy Twelves. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very good evening to you. This is the home of common sense. This is Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petri Hoskin with you until 1 a.m. tomorrow morning. So very much hope that you will stick with me for the duration, because your messages have already been coming in. The phone in at midnight tonight is going to be about who should have the vote and why, basically. Who should have the vote and should there be any terms and conditions attached to that? 0344 499 1000 is the number. Now, it's time to walk right up my strata, because regular listeners to Petri will know that once in a while I am daring enough to put on what I might describe as a bit of a geeky hat. And that is because I absolutely love anything to do with technology. Now, actually, this is not something I often say on air, if I've actually said it at all. First and foremost, actually, before I say what I'm about to say, let me introduce Andy Twelves, who is from the Chartered Institute for IT. He is live in the studio. Very nice of you to join us, Andy. Good evening. Now, the thing that I don't say on air very often is that actually at one stage in my very strange existence is that I was a Microsoft certified computer technician.
Were you really?
I was, really. So I don't say this very often because I don't really want to be associated with that life anymore, because it was a long time ago. But it is true that, yes, I used to be proper full-on, if you like, geek. So, and that's actually one of the reasons why, hence the suits, that my nickname is the Chic Geek.
The Chic Geek, of course.
There you go. You see?
Of course.
Any odd way, from one geek to another. It's very nice to see you in the studio. So thank you for joining us at this unearthly hour, I might suggest. But you've got a few stories that you have been picking out for us and you've been looking at, and one in particular that I'm very much looking forward to talking about, we will get to eventually, is this story about how AI is going to, shall we say, revolutionise the world of whiskey. But I'm not going to say any more than that for now, because first we have to talk about a new report about the future of work.
Yes, so this is a new report by the Institute for the Future of Work. It was put together by Professor Phoebe Moore and Dr. Gwendolyn Barnard, and it's talking about effective computing, effective with an A, that is, not effective. Algorithm effect management, which kind of employs biometric and emotional data to influence workplace safety and efficiency. So if you're looking at factories, you're looking at warehouses, that kind of thing, they're using kind of predictive measures to ensure that, you know, well-being and safety will be as efficient as it can be. But in this new report, they found out that actually it's going the other way. Management are misusing it, and there's an over-reliance on these technologies that's actually being pretty detrimental to workers, and there's a kind of commodification of workers' emotions. And the report kind of goes through and it talks about how the kind of current laws when it comes to technology in the workplace really isn't up to scrap, even though we had the techie Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, we had Matt Clifford in organising the Bletchley Park Summit, he's doing AI Opportunities Plan. The laws in this country really aren't ready for technology in the
Doesn't this sort of go to show, though, don't you think, that I believe this anyway, that it just goes to prove how the laws are just not keeping up with the progression of technology? Yeah. And this is actually primarily what probably scares me the most about artificial intelligence, or AI as people refer to it as. And I know that this is not necessarily what this story was about, but in terms of what AI has the potential to do, if with the technology that is controlled by humans is already facing this kind of problem, can you just imagine what kind of law is going to be required for the technology that is not controlled by humans? That's what bothers me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a huge legislative error across so many different industries, whether it's, you know, protecting jobs, protecting against automation, you know, the presence of AI in places like schools, in the workplace, in art, you know, copyright in music is a huge issue. You know, you've got the big kind of label giants like Sony battling and lobbying in Parliament. You've got the artists lobbying in Parliament to ensure
I was going to say, the artists, there's some pretty big artists putting their names to it as well. I've read Kate Bush's name appear. I've also read Sir Paul McCartney, just to name but a couple. There's loads who are getting in on this. So.
Yeah, I mean, a story from earlier this year, Scarlett Johansson was going after, I think it was OpenAI, for using a voice that sounded extremely similar to hers.
And OpenAI, by the way, the company is behind ChatGPT, which is probably the most common AI software that is in use at the moment.
Yeah, of course, other brands are available. Claude,
Absolutely.
Anthropic, there are lots of them.
I'm perfectly sure other lawsuits are available.
Of course. But yeah, I think this report really highlights the kind of really technical side of the legislation, or the lack of legislation, really, and they really do need to get a grip. The government need to take into account, wow, this is evolving quicker than the legislation is moving, and they need to get a grip.
Yeah, totally. And by the way, actually, can I just say as well, when you say about algorithms, I know that there are some people who listen to that and think, oh, what's algorithms? Just to make it very clear, because I know that algorithms is a very strange and modern word, it basically is about it's about a reaction is what it boils down to. So it's about a computer software learning behaviour in order to react appropriately to give you more of what you need or want is probably the best way of describing, I'd say, what algorithm is. Any odd way. Going to come back to the whiskey story because I want to. I keep teasing it. I want to talk about it, but let's talk about some of the others first. We've got a report that shows that most teachers don't want AI. Oh, amen to that. But anyway, yes, what is this?
So this is a new report that came out earlier this month from BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. They surveyed over 5,000 teachers across the secondary sector, whether it's state sector, private sector, north, south, up and down the country. And there were some pretty big statistics that came out of it. You know, 64% of teachers aren't using AI at the moment, with most of them citing a lack of guidance from senior leadership or their multi-academy trust. 41% reported that their schools have no clear AI policy, and 84% have said that they haven't adjusted assessment methods despite the way that AI is influencing the way that you can copyright, the way you can react to exam questions, the way that you can write essays. This report, I think, is long overdue. The role of AI in the classroom is something that's been debated over the last couple of years, especially with the rise of things like ChatGPT, with Claude.
Well, I was going to say, actually, I think it's the use of AI in the classroom, and not so much from the teacher's perspective, but more about from the pupil's perspective. But actually, we do need to think about the impact on teachers as well. Look, to some degree, OK, I'm going to level with you, and this might be a bit controversial. I know I've just sort of said and so say all of us, but actually, it's more about if AI can improve the standards of teaching, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
If AI is going to replace teachers, I'm not for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this plays into the wider narratives in the education sector. You know, we've got a staffing crisis. Not enough people are coming into the profession. Not enough people are staying in the profession. So if this can, you know, free up 10 to 15 minutes a day for each teacher, you know, automating the simple tasks like, you know, setting out the spreadsheets, setting out the exam questions, you know, just automating the little things that would take them a lot more time, I think that's fantastic.
Dare I even suggest the marking, really?
Yes, absolutely.
You know, actually, even if AI could be used to, if you like, mark down what a pupil's potential work is, and even if it's not the absolute, you know, it doesn't have to be the finished product. It could just be a case of saying, right, AI has done sort of the basic skimming and has said that these suggestions should be made in terms of basic improvement. Then get the teacher to go over it to verify and then actually add to it if they want to. That could just be an example.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway,
I think just on the report, there were some key recommendations in there, and it is kind of, you know, that what was it? 41% of the teachers said that there isn't a clear AI policy. Obviously, that's a minority, but that's still a lot of schools, a lot of teachers.
Yeah.
You know, this report calls on the DfE to set out clear guidelines where ethical and practical uses of AI can be used in the classroom for the benefit of both the students and the teachers. And I think that's the kind of key point here.
No, absolutely. No, I actually do believe that that's probably going to be one of the areas that's most fascinating to see what AI does. All of the other worlds in which AI is kind of used, I don't really think we're going to see much change. Like, for example, right, in the world of medicine, yes, it's great improvements, but thank goodness we live in a day and age where we're actually quite used to seeing great improvements in modern medicine. So that in itself probably won't be a massive culture shock. If you have a look at the way that AI can improve in terms of search engines, well, people have searched online for years to get answers to certain things, so we're probably not going to see much of an improvement on that. If you're now talking about the fundamental of early years being heavily impacted and possibly improved by AI, then who knows what that leads to? Because if it ultimately leads to an improvement in the quality of, if you like, finished pupil we end up with, then I think that could be very exciting to see what happens in the future, because if people are better educated, who knows what their possibilities are in later life.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I digress. So let's have a look at this story now from Apple. Why are Apple being urged to scrap a new AI feature? What is this feature that they're being urged to scrap?
So this is Apple Intelligence. You know, I can feel Steve Jobs rolling in his grave.
No, I'm really excited by Apple Intelligence. In case anyone doesn't know, by the way, Apple Intelligence is basically, in concept anyway, not so much reality.
No, as it seems.
In concept, anyway, Apple Intelligence is supposed to be software from Apple that is supposed to greatly improve the way that you experience your Apple technology. So this could be anything from, I don't know why I'm doing this actually, you should be explaining this. But it's
no, please, it makes it easier for
me. Sorry, I'm still in tech mode.
No, please.
Sorry. It's supposed to be how it is improving your experience with Apple technology. It could be anything from even something as simple as when you write a diary entry. It's supposed to learn your behaviour enough to say, could that be with this person at this time at this location? Because it's learned what you do. Does that make sense? Anyway, so I understand sort of why it sounds good on paper, but what's the reality?
So obviously the BBC, you know, your former stomping ground, they send out...
That was quite a few years ago, but yes.
Wow, former. They send out news notifications that loads of people use. You know, a lot of people kind of primarily consume their news. They won't watch the TV, they won't listen to the radio, they'll just look at the notifications on their phone. And with this Apple Intelligence feature, one of the features of it is that it automatically summarises the notifications. And the BBC are not happy with how this has gone. You know, one of the biggest news stories over the last month has been the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO in New York, Luigi Mangione. One of the ways that the Apple Intelligence had summarised this notification was that he had shot himself. It also falsely stated that with a New York Times notification that Israeli Prime Minister Bibi had been arrested. It's not true. I think, you know, obviously Luigi Mangione was accused of shooting United Healthcare CEO. Benjamin Netanyahu wasn't arrested. He started a court case.
I have to say that for those who are watching us now, by the way, there's an example on screen of exactly the kind of summary that you're talking about and what it looks like. I have to say, I just read it. It almost makes no sense.
Yes. No, it's
just, what on earth are they talking about? It says Luigi Mangione shoots himself.
Yeah.
It then goes on to say something totally different, and then winds up talking about something to do with Seoul in South Korea.
Yeah, no,
bizarre.
It's bizarre. The BBC have launched a complaint. Reporters Without Borders Borders, which is not a professional body, but an organisation of reporters from across the world, across different outlets. They've gone, no, this is silly. This is diluting journalism. This is making journalism seem silly. You know, journalists already have a trust and faith problem at the moment. This is just going to make it even worse. We need to scrap it off. And yeah, Apple are just coming under fire again.
Well, there you go. So the BBC have said that they're unhappy with what's happening to BBC News. Now you know what the rest of us feel like. Anyway, let's focus now on this final story, which I have been teasing for literally the most of the last hour. I'm very excited about the possibility of it because it combines two of my favourite things, technology and whiskey. Please drink responsibly. So what is it that AI is going to do? No, please do. What is it that AI is going to do that means that the whiskey world might have something to look forward to?
Yeah, so when I saw this in The Guardian, it was written by the science editor, when I was putting the stories together today, I was thinking, wow, this is perfect. Phil Davin for Petri.
Almost. It does come from The Guardian, though, so it's not completely
I know. I thought, almost. But yeah, whiskey, tech, what more is there in life?
Decent journalism?
Well, quite. Well, you know, the two aren't...
sorry, allegedly.
But you can't have decent journalism without whiskey, Phil.
Well, quite.
Let's be honest here. But there was a study led by Dr. Andreas Graskamp at the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany that analysed the different chemical compositions of 16 whiskies, US and Scottish whiskies, and trained the algorithms on the specific notes in each whiskey. And the AI's been able to identify the keynotes, such as, you know, menthol in US whiskies, methyl decanoate, and heptanoic acid in Scotch.
I'm so pleased you said that. I wasn't even going to try. Did you notice that?
I did attempt. I tried my best,
silent.
guys. I tried my best, guys. I tried my best. And
it was a very good attempt, to be fair.
It was a good effort. It was a good effort. And they've trained these models to analyse the aromas. And it's almost over 90% accuracy, which I would say, you know, most people are not whiskey connoisseurs like yourself, Phil. You know,
no, but do you know, it has to be said, even whiskey connoisseurs, they can smell it. They might actually sort of either think they get the notes, you know, they might think that actually their nose is quite strong and they can actually realise what they're picking up. That's not always right. They certainly can't always identify the whiskey. Like, for example, if you have a sniff of a certain type of whiskey and then say, without doubt, it's this one, there are very few people who can do that. I know one chap who absolutely can. He's extraordinary. But even then, his knowledge is limited purely based on no other reason than, of course, there are so many whiskies in the world. Anyway, we could talk about whiskey and technology for a long time. Sadly, time has beaten us. But I do have to say, Andy Twells from Chartered Institute for IT, thank you very much indeed for talking tech and also for joining us in the studio. More from the home of common sense right after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
A very good evening to you. It is rapidly approaching 10 to 11. 10 to 11 already? That's ridiculous. Where on earth has the time gone? It's Phil Dave in for Petrie Huskin with you until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning here on Talk. And there is still loads more to come. Well, after 11 o'clock, Efe Akintade, one of our friends and our favourite broadcasters, are going to be joining us live in the studio. He's going to be going through Tuesday's front pages for you. And we'll also have a little chat about this discussion that I want to speak to you about after midnight tonight, and that is about the right to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds will be included in an election bill as soon as next year the Commons leader has suggested. So if that is the case, I'm asking you, who should be allowed to vote, and should there be any terms and conditions attached to who should be allowed to vote? 0344 499 1000. Do get in touch. Would love to hear what you're saying. Some of you messaging already, which is great. Look forward to reading out some of those later. 87222. Start your message with the word talk. And you can also tweet at Mr. Phil Dave and at talkTV. Loads of ways to get in touch. Absolutely no excuse whatsoever. Right. This is something that I don't often say, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's time to talk sport. Yes, I don't mean our sister station, which of course is a great listen any time of day, but no, I mean talk sport with Alex Three Lions Irons, who, as you know, is a regular on a Monday evening here on Petrie's show. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that is absolutely no exception for me. He's joined me live now. Alex, good evening.
Good evening, Phil. Always a pleasure talking to you, not just in the corridor when I see you, but on the show as well. I'll just say a Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah as well.
Absolutely, yes. Happy Hanukkah and a very happy Christmas as well. Thank you very much indeed. Now, look, actually, this is terrible. I've forgotten to wish all the guests out. That makes me horrible now because I've forgotten to say it. Oh, I wish everyone a happy Christmas, all right? Just in case I forget to say it. Leave me alone. Anyway, now, look,
I've been on air for 30 seconds. I'm making you look bad already.
I expected it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I am actually going to expect you to make me look very bad, though, because we're going to talk about sport, and it's not necessarily something I'm strongest in, but always happy to give it a go. And luckily, you are the expert on it, which is why I want you to tell us exactly what it is that Manchester City is in crisis about, because apparently the crisis deepens, according to this particular article, as Arsenal close the gap on Liverpool. So why is that a disaster for Manchester City?
Yeah, well, I was going to say I'm not quite an expert, but out of both of us, maybe I've got a bit more expertise than you might do.
If I'm your barometer, you're the expert.
But as you said, like, City's crisis has intensified. They've slipped down to 6th place after losing to Aston Villa 2-1 over the weekend. They are, of course, last season's defending champions. They are 9 points behind leaders Liverpool, having played 2 games more, while Villa, who are in Champions League football this year for the first time since the 1980s, they've moved above them into 5th. It is now 9 defeats in 12 games in all competitions for Man City, who are winless in their last 8 away matches as their season continues to spiral downwards. Pep had made 6 changes from the Manchester Derby defeat last week, but it didn't really make any difference at all during another laboured performance. Villa looked pretty strong. They had only just won 3 of their previous 11 top-flight games. They earned a much-needed victory, one to keep their top 4 hopes firmly alive. City just seem to be having a bit of a self-belief issue, I think, more than anything else. They've gone from
which is quite surprising. I was going to say, which is pretty surprising, because I think it's fair assessment to say that Manchester City, certainly from what I have observed, have been relatively strong in recent times. And I actually think that to sort of see now that potentially the word crisis is being used in a headline seems to me like a bit of a fall from grace for them.
Yeah, the wheels have definitely fallen off at the Etihad for Manchester City. It's a mix maybe between like I said, a self-confidence issue. They have had injuries. Rodri, who is a very key player for them in the midfield for Man City, he's been injured. He will be injured for the rest of the season, and had been injured around about the time that the wobble started to happen. So maybe he was a lot more integral and a lot more important to the way the City played than people looking from the outside in and realised. They were a bit wobbly before this fall. They had a couple of close shaves against sides like Fulham and other teams in the mid to lower ends of the table, but the fact that they've now gone to this point where they've been struggling to pick up wins, I think it's also their 10th defeat in 11 in all competitions. Not looking good for Pep Guardiola, who only a couple of weeks ago we saw having scratch marks all over his face because of the way he's been dealing with the fact that his team haven't been performing on the pitch.
Oh dear, yes, it doesn't sound completely ideal. Can I just ask actually a really quick question? In your professional opinion, how much of that confidence comes from the top? Because to my mind, surely the confidence should come from the players, but actually, ultimately, I suppose it's in the leadership, isn't it, really?
It's a bit of both, I think. I think it goes hand in hand. You've got to have the confidence from the top, which filters through, and the confidence from the players that filters up to the board and the upper management. We do know, of course, that there is this looming threat over Man City of these 115, 130 charges that the Premier League is looking to, or is going over in the courts at the moment with Manchester City due to financial fair play ruling. We're not going to find out about that until early next year. I think we were looking at no earlier than February, I think. So the fact that maybe that's got something to do with it, Pep Guardiola had signed a contract extension for 2 years a couple of weeks ago. At that point, people were thinking, okay, maybe there's more to this than we think there is. Maybe he knows something that people don't know, but the results haven't changed. I'm not going to say that Pep's job is in the firing line here. I think that his job is safe regardless of where City are at the end of this season. I think Pep has got so much mileage in the tank that he could, he might not win another game this year. And I think...
Hey, look, do you know, who knows? It could just be a bad start to the season and things might change in the new year. Who only knows? Now, look, there's a couple other stories we want to try and squeeze in before I let you go, so let's try and get through those. And why is it that it could be that Arsenal star Saka is not having a, not very good time at the moment?
Well, he has been, according to Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta, he will miss many weeks with a hamstring injury. He was forced off during Saturday's 5-1 win against Crystal Palace and left Selhurst Park on crutches. TalkSport can understand that he won't be available for Arsenal until February, although Arteta hasn't put a timescale on it. He's just saying he'll be out for many weeks. He's also said it is what it is. It is what it is. He's injured. We cannot change it. We're going to use this time now to help him.
Well, hopefully, obviously, we wish him a very speedy recovery. Now, let us talk about something very fitting for this time of year, because Fulham and Nigeria's Iwobi he's been playing Santa. What's he been up to?
Yeah, so Alex Iwobi has been spreading Christmas cheer in his home town, in Canning Town in East London, by opening up his own temporary shop. He's giving out free food in a shop that he's calling Al Express, which has someone also called Alex. I now can't use that name personally because it's probably copywritten.
But I tell you one thing you can do, Alex, is we can enjoy, we've got a bit of the moment of the advert or something like that I think we can show. So let's enjoy this, shall we? Because apparently there's even an advert he's produced for it as well. Let's have a look at this.
You know that Christmas ingredients are free here. Roby?
Bro, my mom's been bugging me for this cabbage, you know.
Alright, bro, you just reminded me I gotta get noodles.
Yeah, yes, Mom. Yeah, I'm getting the cabbage, don't worry.
Oh, bro, you finally got the cabbage.
Yes, bro.
Got the noodles too.
Yes, bro.
Come on, bro. Thank you, man.
Have you got everything you need? I think so. Are you sure? Nah, you not forgot about this.
Do you know, it's sort of got Marcus Rashford vibes about it, really, hasn't it? You know, if we think about how he tirelessly campaigned when it came to improving the nutrition of so many, I think millions of school children, really. I don't think that's an exaggeration. It's kind of got that sort of feel to it, isn't it? It's a footballer who's actually using their position for some blooming good, and I like seeing that.
Yeah, it's something that we don't see, at least publicly, enough of. There are players that do a lot of charity work, but this is something that is a lot more creative than you might see other football players do. I really like the fact that he's doing this. And as a Fulham fan, I've got to back him because he plays for Fulham and that's my club. So I can't say anything bad against him.
Well, of course. But I must admit, I do think it would be very hard to say something bad against someone doing this anyway. But yeah, absolutely.
No, I think he's doing an amazing job.
Alex, I wanted you to try and give us a rundown about some of the sport that we can expect to see over the festive season, but unfortunately we're flat out of time, so I guess people are just going to have to tune into TalkSport instead. But it's been an absolute delight speaking to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Alex at 3 Irons Lions, and his thoughts on some of the sporting stories making the headlines at the moment. Right, coming up in the next hour, Efe Akintade will be here. He is going to join us to review the front pages for Tuesday, so very much look forward to hearing what Ebbs has to say. Join us right after this.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
The Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, hello. This is the Paper Review Hour here on Talk. I'm Phil Dave, in for Petri Hoskin. And over the course of the next hour, I'm absolutely delighted to say that I will be joined in the studio by the marvel that is Efe Akintade. Of course, he's a broadcaster. He's also, I'm just going to say it, he's a buddy, he's a pal, I don't care. We can be friends, can't we? So it's all good. Ebbs and I have known each other for a fair old few years. I was trying to work that out, actually, you know. How long do you reckon we have? Because we always used to work at the BBC together as well. And that was...
It's over 10 years.
It is over 10 years, I thought so, yeah.
It is.
So it is quite a few moons ago now, which just makes both of us sound very old. Though I do have to say, Ebbs hasn't changed at all. I'm just putting it out there. I used to have hair when I first knew him. It's a bit of...
I never knew you with hair.
10 years ago you would have done.
Oh, no, I did. That's a lie. That's
you see, he's forgotten it. That's how long it's been since I had hair.
But you haven't aged.
Oh, that's really kind of you to lie like that. Thanks. Anyway, that's my Christmas present wrapped up in a nutshell. There you go. You just told me basically that I haven't aged. Liar. Anyway, Ebbs is here to go through Tuesday's front pages, which we will do in just a moment's time. But before we do that, I wanted to pick up a subject that has been discussed of late, really, here on Talk, and actually all over the place, really. Now, I know you weren't fully expecting this, so forgive me, but I do like to get people's gut reaction more than anything. And that's about this story about the right to vote and how obviously it was announced in the manifesto of the Labour government that they would lower the voting age to 16. So it sort of inspired me to sort of think along the lines of who should be allowed to vote and whether or not there should be any terms and conditions attached to that. So I've sort of quite happily declared in the past that I believe that, yes, there should be terms and conditions. I actually believe that there should be an examination to everyone who is given the vote. And I really mean this, and I tell you why, is because exactly the same way that driving a car is quite life-altering, right? Who you vote in could also be quite life-changing. And I believe that by making sure people absolutely fully understand the power their vote has, I don't think is a bad thing. Now, I'm not talking about, by the way, the toughest exam known to man. I don't want to see people sort of basically be told, well, if you're not academic, you're not going to be allowed to vote. That's ridiculous. I don't mean that. But I just think a few basic questions that could ultimately determine that someone fully appreciates what their vote means would go a long way.
I know what you mean. So you kind of want more of a... It's like a declaration before they vote to go... Or that almost asks like 5 questions, like... Are you aware of who you're voting for? Do you accept that by voting you understand the importance of this vote for future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a bit yes or no, isn't it? I'm sort of more talking about that there would probably, like, for example, right, who is in charge of the Exchequer? Do you know what I mean? So even if they just turned around and said, well, it's the Chancellor, obviously, you know, even something as simple as that means that people would know the difference. Because I've got to be honest with you, I think if people don't know how the government make financial decisions for this country, I don't need them to know the science behind it. But if they don't actually know, potentially, who is, if you like, the one who's responsible for fiscal decisions and for decisions that are ultimately going to affect the pennies in your pocket, really, by voting, isn't that quite dangerous to let them do that?
Yes, but of course then you have things like Brexit happen, and dare I say the B word this late in the night, but those kind of things do and can happen. I think if anything, if you're going to try and examine people before they vote, that could in itself act as a deterrent, because that could stop them from thinking, well, actually, I just want to have the freedom to vote. If you're going to start testing me on my freedom to vote, then you're doubting my respectability as a voter. So I should just be free to vote regardless of what anyone thinks. It's my vote, it's my responsibility, and I know what I'm doing, and I will pay the consequences. I think it's many levels is a democracy. You can't say, or maybe you can say, that, you know, people are now less intelligent when voting. People are as intelligent as they've always been.
Oh, I don't know. It might be.
What skews?
But it may be, to be fair, successive governments' fault that they are. I'm just saying.
Yes, but also with the rise of, I heard you talking about it in the last hour, the rise of AI, with the rise of social media and people being swayed a certain way in terms of how they vote, they also have an impact in terms of how people are voting. So it's not necessarily down to the individual, it's down to the news that's being fed to them, whether it's for big old elections like the presidential election over in the US, whether it's down to our elections. People are swayed and can be a bit brainwashed by what they see on social media, or even like treat news on Facebook or on TikTok as actual news, as opposed to getting the right level of information from trusted sources. So, and that you can't stop people from doing that. That's just
okay,
happens.
all right. So on that basis then, where do you stand on the idea of 16 and 17-year-olds getting the vote?
I think there are educated 16 and 17-year-olds who should be entitled to vote. I do think it's...
But there are also 16 and 17-year-olds who would very happily just sit in front of a screen all day long and rot.
Yes.
And it just worries me that someone who perhaps, and I'm going to level with you, I'm not even completely convinced that 18-year-olds, and I'm speaking as someone who was once 18 myself. I know this comes as a major shock. It was quite a long time ago, but I was once 18. Yeah. I'm speaking as someone who actually, even at the age of 18 myself, was not convinced that I was old enough to vote in an election. I obviously did. I exercised my right. I actually think I could vote at the age of 18 because I don't think there was an election in that year. But whatever it was, I know that as soon as an election came up, that I did absolutely, and I loved the process. You know, I felt very grown up going to that polling booth and putting across
the vote.
Absolutely. But at the same time, I'm not going to pretend that my knowledge of politics now was anything like it should have been. Let's say when I was that age and I had the right to vote. And I think it was by design. I just didn't really take as much of an interest.
I'm going to slightly answer your question with a question, which is maybe it should just be optional for those who are 16 to 18. So give them the option to vote. Everyone has the option to vote.
True.
But I think with 16...
You say everyone has the option. Everyone know what you mean. Everyone who is of voting age now has the option to
vote. Or not vote. But I think with 16 to 18-year-olds, why not? Because there are individuals in that age bracket who are more politically minded, who understand the process more, so they should be given the absolute right to be able to vote. The turnout in that age bracket might be quite low, but I think that's acceptable. I don't think you can start examining people on their ability to vote. I think we have to give some level of trust to voters. And I know that is controversial because, of course, you could say, well, some people are just idiots and they shouldn't be given the chance to vote, whatever age they are.
But then, but herein lies another part of this dilemma, is then, obviously, there's much controversy around the idea of prisoners being allowed to vote. And to my mind's eye, I just think that if someone has broken the law of this land, why on earth should that person be allowed to change the law of this land with a vote? You know, that's my logic. That's the way I think. But at the same time, there'll be people who say, but hang on a second, that's a disgrace to their human rights. They live in a democracy. Why shouldn't they be? I'm genuinely torn half the time.
Yeah, and I think I'm a bit torn as well, because I do, as prisoners, whether you're a prisoner for 6 months to 25 years, you still should have the right to cast your vote, because you are... even though you might...
But they wouldn't be a prisoner if they didn't break that law.
Yes, it's true. But I you know, in terms of... We think about rehabilitation for prisoners, we think about the long term in terms of getting them back involved in society. That can be a way of feeling... Of making them feel like they are part of society, as opposed to feel like completely outside of that because they are incarcerated. Yes, we know that they've broken the law for whatever reason to be incarcerated, but they still should have an impact as to what kind of life they're going to have once they get out, if they get out.
Well, I dare say that whatever occurs when it comes to the voting age, it will be very interesting all the same. Ebbs, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on that. Let us get on with the job in hand, and that is to go through Tuesday's front pages. So we'll have a look, first of all, at the Times. And the Times leads with a few stories that actually all really got great points to discuss. So let's get straight into this. The top line is young drivers break the law to keep insurance costs down. Nearly 1 in 5 young motorists are on the road illegally as the cost of car insurance rises to record levels. So researchers found that 21% of male drivers aged 17 to 25 and 15% of female drivers of the same age group, by the way, are committing insurance fraud by falsely claiming that they are not the main driver on their policy. Now, I have to say that I would never encourage anyone to break the law, but I'm not surprised they're doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I don't encourage it, but I'm not surprised.
I have to make... I did read this and have to read it a couple of times because this is known as, in inverted commas, fronting. So they put themselves down... They say that they are not the main driver on their policy.
Yes.
That's interesting. I didn't even know you could do... But obviously, if you're the owner of that policy, why would you not put yourself down as the main driver? That's what...
Well, no, that's the whole point. So what they're doing is that they're potentially maybe getting a parent or guardian who is of an older age to put themselves down as the name driver. So in other words, they are the main driver of that vehicle, and therefore you need your child, in inverted commas, added as an occasional driver, where they're not the occasional driver. What they're basically doing is they're the main driver, but it's cheaper for them to say that they are the if you like, the backup driver. Now, it has to be said, technically speaking, right, they are insured. So you could argue that they're not breaking the law in that sense.
By being uninsured.
But what they are doing is that they are falsely declaring to the insurance company, and that's what's breaking the law. Does that make sense?
Yes,
so it's not so much a case of that they're not insured, and therefore that is, as we know, not having car insurance is a criminal offence. And of course, no one should ever do that. What they are doing is they are insured, but they are falsely declaring something that is not true to their insurance company, and as a result of it, it means that they are breaking the law in that sense.
And in the way you said that, it's not surprising. Well, the average annual cost of cover for a 17-year-old is now £2,728.
Which is ridiculous. It's more than the cost of most people's first cars. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I have to say, I actually do believe that as much as please bear in mind, I've said it already, I'll say it again, that the insurance of a car is legal. Okay, it's a legal requirement. You must be insured to drive in this country.
Yes.
However, I have often wondered what not making it a legal requirement would do to the competitive nature of the market of the insurance companies, because what it would say is, well, if you're too expensive, well, then I'm just not going to bother, and therefore they would stand to lose money. So they would have to, they'd almost be forced to lower their prices to make it more competitive. Whereas now they say, well, good luck, we're all on the same wavelength here. We're all charging about £2,500 to insure a 17-year-old driver. Good luck finding it cheaper elsewhere. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do see what you mean. Can I also just continue with that, saying that if it's £2,728 for a 17-year-old
per annum, by the way, you know, that's
per annum, but
that's ridiculous.
But for a 45-year-old, it's £814 on average in terms of...
Which is still a stupid amount, because I genuinely remember it where it was only a couple of £100 for my parents' generation. So it's still gone up exponentially into the most unbelievably unforgivable degree.
The price difference has encouraged the parents of some young motorists to claim they are the main driver on their child's car, and the child is just added to the policy as a main driver.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. So that's what they're doing, which is basically suggesting that that's in a bid to try and get the cost of the insurance down. What people would do is that although they are not breaking the law by not being insured to drive, what they are doing by breaking the law is they're falsely declaring that they are not the main driver of that vehicle. That's where it's a problem. So what they've done is that they have said that it's the parent or the guardian who will be the main driver of the vehicle. Therefore, OK, the insurance company would think around the lines of, say, £814 per annum. And they say, right, OK, well, now I want to add my 17-year-old child to that policy to allow them to drive. Oh, well, in that case, but if they're not the main driver, then it means they're not going to be as much of a risk to the vehicle. Therefore, we're probably only going to add another, say, £1,000 to the policy. So suddenly, you're talking about a grand's difference. So you actually totally understand why people feel they're forced into doing this. Again, not condoning it, not encouraging it. It is illegal. Falsely declaring anything to your insurance company is breaking the law. And that's the problem here.
I know, and it just goes to show how cash-strapped a lot of people are, and how the whole insurance process is quite unfair for those who are new drivers. Last year, a record 6,316 drivers aged between 17 and 20 were convicted of the offence of driving without any insurance at all.
Yeah, no, and that is
just to save money.
Totally and utterly not OK. And it is against the law, so please don't do that. Right, OK, well, obviously insurance is a massive sore point to an awful lot of people.
Yes, it is.
Let's look at some of the other headlines on the front page. We're still only on the Times, so we've got quite a way to go. We've got some other papers, so let's go through the rest of the Times. It says here on the headline here, 5th of the forces can't be relied on to fight. Thousands of regulars, medically unfit or limited. So it means that more than 10,000 serving sailors, soldiers and aircrew cannot go to war because they have been declared medically unfit. I think this is really not only disturbing, really surprising.
Is it surprising? I don't think it is that surprising, actually.
Come on, you think of people in the military, you think they go through fitness regimes and that they're all pumped up and ready, you know, these guardians, these warriors, if you like.
Yes.
And now we're being told that they're not medically fit?
Yes. Well, in addition, 15,000 personnel can only be deployed if the mission meets certain criteria, such as the weather is not too hot or too cold, and they're not exposed to noise. I mean, there are so many criteria that they have to comply with and stick to. I think we're so tightly regulated now. I think on the one side, me being naive and living in my little happy bubble, is that, well, at least we're not going to go to war anytime soon. We hope.
From your mouth to the Almighty's ears, please.
We hope. But the fact is that so many people are medically not deployable. I don't think that's surprising. I do think a lot of people are fine to be serving sailors and soldiers, and they're fine to do the job on the ground at their bases doing that. But to actually go out and fight in a war, I don't think it's that surprising. I do think we'll struggle to get the numbers.
Oh, yeah, I don't think it really is a major shock to learn that this country is not ready for war if it was to strike,
No.
but even so. And the other story on the front page, also, I should say, there is a mighty fine photo of His Majesty, and it's basically just about his Christmas message. I'm sure there'll be more on that on the other front pages. And the other story on the front page of the Times, humbling truth of how slow-thinking humans are. The human brain processes thoughts at only millionths of the speed at which information is transmitted over the internet, research has found. I'm going to give you time to process that very thought. We'll be back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, this is the Paper Review Hour. We're going through the front pages, we being me, Phil Dave, in for Petri Hoskin, and we've also got Efe Akintade in the studio with us for the next few moments. Let's go through, Ebbs, the front page of the Daily Express. And this is not necessarily a major shock when it comes to the Daily Express because it is His Majesty the King. And we all know the Daily Express are known for two particular subject matters that they love to talk about: the royals and the weather.
The weather,
so
yeah.
let's focus on, in this particular edition, the royals. And it is about how the King's message is about unity and hope at, oh, Daily Express, you've let us down, at Xmas. No, at Christmas. It's not Xmas.
What have we got against Xmas?
Oh, I can't bear it when people say it's Christmas. You'd never say Xmas out loud. Why do they write it down?
Because it fills the space appropriately, because Christmas would run over the...
Pish. Anyway, it's fine. Well, it's nonsense anyway.
Okay.
Right. Anyway. Right. Okay. So yes, I do apologise. PISH is a Yiddish word. I'm so sorry, but it basically just means rubbish. I'm sorry.
Pish. Yeah, we know pish.
It always is pish.
Yes.
It's fine. Any odd way. Right. So yes, Daily Express. King's message of unity and hope at Christmas. Will you be here? Would you be tuning into His Majesty's speech?
I will be tuning at 3 o'clock on the big
Christmas
day.
Yeah.
Yes, I will. Yes, I expected to hear him to say what he normally says. Actually, I think this is what... Is this going to be his second?
One.
Second or third?
One.
Is it third?
Yeah, his first one was in 22 after Her Late Majesty died.
Is it the September? That's right.
So
yes.
yeah, so that was his first one where he obviously paid tribute to the late Queen. Then obviously his second one was last year, and this is his third one.
This is the third one. Yeah, I will say I'm sure he's going to mention his own personal battles as well.
Yes, well, apparently what he's doing, he's actually broken tradition this year, and as a result of it, the King's Christmas speech is actually going to be delivered from a former hospital chapel, which apparently is something that the late Queen only did a handful of times.
Okay.
More often than not, it was always from a royal residence, which I think in itself, it kind of does go to show, I feel, the way that King Charles is trying to, albeit to some probably not as fast as they'd like, but to try and modernise the monarchy. Because actually it feels as though that every Christmas speech has been slightly different to what we would have expected from the late Queen.
Okay, slightly different isn't slightly better.
Well, listen, it might be better to some, but I just think it's slightly different. For example, right, obviously the very first Christmas speech, most of us would never have seen a monarch paying tribute to the previous monarch, because for most of us, Queen Elizabeth II was the only monarch we ever knew.
Correct.
And so as a result of it, it was quite a sombre Christmas message where, of course, King Charles is paying tribute to his late mother. Then if you have a look at the last year's Christmas message, if my memory serves me, I think I'm right in saying this. I mean, I don't really remember what I did the day before yesterday, never mind
a year
last
ago.
year. But my memory, I think, serves me when he stood up to deliver the King's speech, whereas often with Her late Majesty, we'd often see her sitting at a desk. He stood up with one hand in the pocket. He kept doing this thing where, do you remember this? He kept looking down. Do you remember? He kept looking down. And then look up at the camera.
I don't remember.
Look down, then look up. It was because it was almost like he was just trying to be more thoughtful. It was very strange. I'm not going to lie. I don't know really, even to this day, how I feel about it, because it just wasn't like any royal message that you'd expect at Christmas time. However, I think that sort of by doing this from the former hospital chapel is basically a nod to his gratitude to the medical staff who have obviously helped him really to survive this year.
Well, yeah, and so he's recording it at Fitzrovia Chapel in central London. He will mention his and the Princess of Wales's health battles in the first Christmas broadcast in 14 years to be filmed away from the royal estate. So it's going to be a little bit different in that way. But, you know, if he's talking about hope, togetherness, all the things that we really need in 2024 and 2025, I'm sure it'll be worth the listen for the 7-8 minutes that it's on.
Absolutely.
Will you be watching?
I do watch the King's Speech normally, yes, I do. I never used to. It's not because I never used to watch Her late Majesty. It was more about actually for many years I just never watched the Queen's Speech because I don't know, it wasn't a thing in our household. And then a few years back still, when Queen Elizabeth II was on the throne, I absolutely did start watching it, and I thought, do you know what, I can totally understand why people make a thing of this. This is a big deal. You know, I understand that there are some people who are not royalists by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, there are plenty of people who've, for so long now, certainly since King Charles ascended to the throne, there's so many people who have been saying, you know, not my king. Well, I hate to tell you, he is your king, whether you like it or not. Get over it, right? But many have said that they don't want a monarchy. I personally think they're wrong. I don't understand why they think like that, but let's not go into that now. It's not really the discussion. But as far as whether or not I watch it, sorry, this is a very long answer to whether or not will you be watching it, but as far as will I be watching it, the reason is, yes, I think it's a very special moment. I actually quite like it.
It's the only part of our Christmas day. I think we'll have Christmas lunch after so it'll be like after 3:10, that's when we eat. So it's definitely
you actually wait until after the King's Speech to have wow, my goodness. You must be famished.
No, because you can graze from morning, have a lovely breakfast, and then graze throughout the day. Everything becomes a bit hazy, and then it's time to eat.
So, okay, now, I can't let this go unchallenged. What kind of things do you graze on, then? Do you have, like, all sorts of nibbles and stuff like that around the flats and the houses and stuff?
Have ackee and saltfish, which is like a Jamaican breakfast. So that's quite
hang on, what I need to hear? What's it, sorry?
Ackee and saltfish.
Tell me more. I like the sound of this.
It's delicious. You wouldn't normally have it as a breakfast meal, but because it's Christmas, make an exception. It's a type of fish. Ackee is a fruit. Together, they're delicious. You have it in the morning with maybe a couple of yams, so it's quite a substantial, solid, heavy breakfast.
So it sounds like it's quite like a sweet and sour thing, possibly?
Yeah. Well, it's sweet and salty, actually.
Sweet and salty, okay, yeah.
And because that's heavy enough to last, for a good few hours, and then out come like the meat platter, a couple of cheeses and everything else, and then you just graze on that. And then
I mean, as a pescatarian, I'm not so toyed with the idea of the meat, but the cheese sounds good.
Yes, so. and then of course you've got like all the Bucks Fizz and all that to keep you on a nice little gentle level. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, where was I?
Yeah,
oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry, I asked now. That's ridiculous. Anyway, can I come round to yours for Christmas?
Oh, of course you are. Most welcome.
Excellent. Right. So who's hosting it? Is it you? Are you hosting or are you going to family?
It's family.
Excellent stuff. Right. Hey, Akintade family. I'm there, just saying.
Okay.
Right. Daily Star.
Yes.
They lead with, Dear Santa, all I want for Christmas is a secure internet connection with a download speed of at least 40 to 100 megabits per second, or Mbps, as it is abbreviated to. And this story, boffins fear our beloved internet could go all wonky over Christmas as people stream a whole host of really cracking television. Sorry, I laugh out of nerves because I didn't even give this any thought. And I'm allegedly some sort of tech expert. But it has to be said that it really does make sense, because obviously the more people that are streaming, the more bandwidth that's being used up at one time. And as a result of it, it is perfectly feasible to suggest that internet connections will become a bit shaky.
Actually, I've been saying that at my mum's the last few days, and I'm in a new build area, so I've got super fast broadband, which is fantastic.
Ooh.
But at hers...
I could have gone down the route of new build as well, you know. I'm just saying. But OK, that's good. All right,
I'm not bragging.
No, that's all right.
Listen, but I've been noticing that my mum's,
Eb's basically saying if you live in some rackety old place, sorry, your internet's just not up to his standard. But it's fine.
Have you noticed more buffering with your internet connection?
So buffering, to anyone who doesn't know, by the way, buffering just means that the speed is not quite up to scratch, so it's playing catch-up with whatever you're downloading.
Yeah, so you're trying to watch something.
I basically have not noticed that much buffering.
Okay.
But then again, I live in a new build as well.
There we go. And you have super fast broadband.
I do have super fast broadband. So, but I also have actually quite a good 5G connection on my phone. So if my internet does go down, I know,
well,
I'm proper shell.
I can't say that.
No, well there you go. You see, it's all about one up. You see, you got to subtle it. It's like a poker player.
Okay,
You've got to be subtle about these things and then just play your cards appropriately.
So yeah,
Gambleaware.org, by the way. It is right as far as though the internet connection, I can't say that I've noticed it myself. I have noticed a couple of drop-offs though. That's why I noticed that I've got good 5Gs, because I just flipped to data. That's the only reason I know. But yeah, I do appreciate that there are a lot of people now who do have to deal with a lot of buffering. It's because of the demand of internet going up, really, and especially as people work from home a lot as well now.
Well, yes, there is that. There is that. So, but I'm not sure if that's going to be high on someone's Christmas list to have super fast, secure internet connection. But maybe it is.
Let's give ourselves a chance to buffer, shall we?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is the Paper Review Hour on Talk. It's Phil Dave in for Petri Hoskin, and joining me is Efe Akintade, broadcaster, and frankly, buddy. We've been having a good old gas. We've hardly gone through any of the front pages, so we probably should pick up the pace a little bit now, to be honest with you. But it's absolutely fine. We'll do that. And this is the front page of the Eye, which I'm not 100% sure whether or not I'm imagining this, and I'm really sorry if you're not watching this, you're just listening to this, because it might not make sense. But I think the Eye has changed their logo recently.
They have, completely, yes.
It looks like a person reading now, rather than just an eye.
I think that's what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. Anyway, well, look, I have noticed, I am paid to be observant, so I do observe these things. Let's have a look at the Eye paper, which leads on for this this Tuesday edition. Reeves needs a Christmas miracle to boost economy as growth stalls. So economists call on Chancellor to develop a plan for growth amid reports that the UK economy has stagnated for 6 months, according to the ONS, as the Office for National Statistics and Bank of England figures. And look, I'm going to level with you. I'm not entirely sure that I'm surprised by this. Disappointed, yes, completely. But I'm not completely sure that it's a major shock, because if my memory serves me, there were quite a lot of people who were calling out to the Chancellor when all of these bits and pieces were leaked from the budget ahead of it being announced, that this wasn't going to work. And quelle surprise.
And people are saying that Labour are going to be single-handedly responsible for fire-rocketing us into a recession after we've just mildly come out of a previous one.
Yeah, which, let's be honest, I mean, I think it's also important to say that we're not looking at this with rose-tinted glasses. You know, I know that the current government are pretty good at mentioning the previous government, but I don't mention them, right? As far as I'm concerned, I want to forget the previous government.
Yes.
I don't really want to mention them either.
Yes.
But it is amazing how this government doesn't seem, at surface value anyway, and certainly in terms of certain figures, to be doing much better.
Well, it definitely doesn't. I think it's got off to a really rocky start. It's only been 3 or 4 months of this new Labour government, and it's been... With all the things that Rachel Reeves has said in her budget, the really harsh budget that was...
Can you believe it's 5 months already?
Is it 5 months?
It was in July, wasn't it?
Oh, wow. OK, so it's 5 months then.
Already.
So, yes, so...
Actually, about to be 6 months, if you think about it, at the beginning of January.
Of January. Yeah. So almost half a year. And everything that they're doing, implementing, businesses are hating because they're saying things like raising national insurance is going to have such a huge impact on them. Whether it's winter fuel... the list is endless as to what Labour have put in place, which is really putting off both their support, but also people who believe in what Labour are going to do. And I think it's having a huge impact. I think I read that Keir Starmer's popularity has nosedived spectacularly.
Oh, yes, and absolutely has. In fact, there are even some reports suggesting that it's the worst nosedive in living memory of any Prime Minister, and that includes almost Boris Johnson to some degree, because Boris Johnson, his sort of unpopularity increased as the revelations unfolded.
Yes.
With Sir Keir. He's only been in the job for 6 months. How can you go from being sort of someone who apparently most people thought was going to make a great Prime Minister to suddenly being, well, quite hated by an awful lot of people?
And that's just within 5 months. So if you double that, what else is going to happen, which is going to put him in even...
Merry Christmas. There's an image for you.
There is an image. So where are we going to be at, like, in May, in terms of this Labour government? Are Rachel Reeves and Keir still going to be in place? Are they still going to be in position? We don't know. I just think that even though back in, when was it, July, when we had the riots... the way Keir and the party dealt with those rioters was really admirable and great, fantastic. But that was the only brief highlight in the last 5 months. Everything else has been basically despair, depression.
But of course, you could look at those rioters, because that was really the start of where an awful lot of people were really crying out about two-tier policing. So they're saying that the rioters were dealt with in a sort of quite abrupt and really quite brusque manner.
Yes.
Whereas we see weekly protests about all sorts of nonsense, especially the bits that are going on in the Middle East at the moment, which we don't need to get into now, but let's just be honest about this, where you've got weekly protests happening about that sort of problem that's not even really affecting this country, but it's having a knock-on effect because of the protest, and yet they seem to be allowed to do whatever they please. So actually, that even in itself, you could argue, led to problems for Sir Keir's government, because people were saying, well, hang on, you dealt with those protesters swiftly enough, why are you not dealing with these ones swiftly?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's a bit messy, to say the least.
It's messy, and it doesn't point in the right direction for Labour at all. Really uncertain times for them.
I'll say. Right, OK, also on the front page of the Eye, by the way, the Prawn Identity is their headline, where they say, love a shrimp cocktail, you may not after reading this. Who only knows what that involves? But there you go. That apparently is in the Eye for Tuesday. Front page of The Sun focuses on His Majesty's message for Christmas. We've obviously already covered it, but King Charles will deliver his Christmas Day message from a former hospital chapel to mark his ongoing cancer treatment. And as you alluded to slightly earlier on in this hour, he's also going to mention the Battle of the Princess of Wales as well. And, you know, I have to say that I think whether one is a royalist or not, I personally say I am a royalist. I'm very happy this country has got a royal family. I would be beyond mortified if anything ever happened to the royal family, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime in the near future, thank goodness, because thank goodness there's not enough demand for it. That to one side, I can't help but think that there has been nowhere near enough focus on how difficult this past year must have been for the Prince of Wales. Could you just imagine what Prince William has gone through by seeing not only his wife, you know, the mother of his child, mother of his children, I should say, in the plural, obviously, of course, but also his father as well, going through this cancer battle, not knowing, literally, from one day to the next, how either of them are going to be. I don't care what money in the world you've got. I don't care what lifestyle you live. That must be hell on earth.
Must be hell on earth. And his auntie, because don't forget Fergie.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, of course.
Yeah, that's a lot for any person, whoever you are.
It's absolutely extraordinary.
A brave face on it, and
but he does though. He really does. He's so stiff upper lip. It's very impressive.
Yeah, he's been taught well, I think.
True. Well, I guess also let's not forget that sort of after Princess Diana died, you know, I suppose that must do terrible things to one's emotions. You know, I mean, the princes have obviously very openly spoken about what it's done to their mental health. But in terms of, I suppose, being forced to grow up even more than you're forced to grow up for being a young prince or princess in the royal family, I'd imagine you have to grow up even more after the
whole trauma,
the death of a mother.
Yeah.
Not to mention in such a public light. So, yeah, extraordinary stuff. Let's have a look at the front page of the Daily Mail, because they also talk about the same story. They say King's message of national healing. They refer to His Majesty chooses ex-hospital chapel for speech praising health workers and how nation came together after summer riots. And it says the King's Christmas message has been inspired by the way the UK pulled together after the Southport murders and riots. And also on the front page of the Daily Mail, does Assad's wife want to divorce him and return to Britain? Because I think a lot of people forget that the former Syrian leader's wife was British born.
Yes.
So that is, Asma al-Assad. It is quite an extraordinary state of affairs over in the Middle East. And actually, when it comes to the idea of whether or not, I don't know. I mean, look, because I think there are some people who would probably think of the poster girl of should they come back to Britain, and that's, of course, Shamima Begum. Now, I know this is a very, very different situation.
Yes.
Very different.
Yes.
But the bottom line is, you are talking about someone who is openly married into what many perceive to be a terrorist regime, right? Assad's regime was a reign of terror, right? It might not have been in some people's eyes, but it was.
No, you can argue that she went into it before knowing what it would turn into. Because it wasn't a dictatorship or a regime when they got married, but that's what it turned into.
Perfectly possibly, but at the same time, you know, still stood by him through that.
Okay,
and
true.
I guess that there will be some who will say, well, hang on a second. I know this is very hypothetical, by the way, because we don't actually know Assad's wife wants to return to Britain. Let me make that very clear. That's not no. This is part of the problem.
Yes,
it's part of the questions raised. But might I suggest that there will be many who think, well, anyone who could stand by someone like Bashar Assad, knowing his regime and what he did do, and really the effects are still being felt even after his demise, if you like. I mean, demise in the sense that he's obviously no longer leader, but it doesn't mean that, of course, the aftermath isn't still very much being felt. It's not a palatable thought, really, in my mind's eye. Anyone who could stand by someone like that being allowed back to Britain, really?
Even if she divorces him beforehand. Because I've been hearing about this rumour about her wanting to divorce him. So if she divorces him, is that divorcing him and that whole process and, you know, that regime?
I don't know, because couples get divorced without changing their political beliefs, do they? Don't they? Really? If you think about it, you know, it just because you separate from someone doesn't mean you're suddenly going to go radically changing your political stance on something just because you happen to separate.
No,
I mean,
no, but I'm going to play devil's advocate and say she could have this realisation that what she was married into wasn't right, was a horrible thing to be part of, and she wants to distance herself from it and come back here.
You put me on a dilemma now.
Yeah, you see?
Nah, I'm not convinced personally, though. One way or another, we'll continue to debate this during this break. See you in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
You join me, Phil Dave, and Efe Akintade for the final part of the pay-per-view hour here on Talk. And we're going through the front pages. Let's move along, Ebbs, to the Daily Mirror. And Daily Mirror says, we will remember them. Now, I had to look at this to absolutely make sure this was Tuesday's front page, because you'd be forgiven for looking at it and thinking, hang on, is this from an edition from November? But no, because they go on to say, calls are growing for an extra bank holiday to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. And apparently 7 in 10 want a bank holiday to mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War. I wonder how much, though, of that 70% actually want it for the reason it's being proposed for.
No, they want it.
Or whether because they just want an extra day off
additional
work.
bank holiday, yes. Yeah, because most people would say we don't have enough bank holidays throughout the year.
We have way more than most, you know. I know we have way more than America.
But I think because we have that 2 in May, I think 1 in August. This is outside of Christmas and New Year. Obviously, the 1 in Easter, in April for Easter. But I think because there's long periods of time where we don't have a bank holiday, people would love an additional bank holiday. But I think, I'm not sure what month that would be to have this...
But I don't know why they see Christmas and New Year as being outside of a bank holiday, because it is still a national holiday.
It is, but I think people view those bank holidays differently to our middle of the year bank holidays, our late spring bank holiday, Easter bank holidays. We feel that they're just different. I don't know why, but people want that additional one. And if it falls somewhere in the summer holidays, that would be brilliant, I think, for a lot of people.
You see, it's strange because obviously, as I mentioned already, that there are quite different rules and regulations when it comes around public holidays and bank holidays as they are in America. In the sense that actually, when it comes to even leave, people only get, I think, statutory is 2 weeks a year leave in America. I'm fairly
understand.
I'm fairly sure that is right.
Yes.
And if that is the case, I have to say that with that in mind, I have personally been of the persuasion, because I'm quite a workaholic, that's never bothered me. But I do understand why that bothers people in this country, okay? Because 2 weeks, really, I mean, what? We're talking, I don't know whether or not that actually equates to 14 days or whether it's actually realistically 10 working days.
Yes.
And I think it is only 10 working days.
Correct.
And if that is the case, that is absurd. That is such a little amount of time, realistically. However, it's absurd because we're spoiled in this country. It's not absurd to Americans. Many Americans, okay, they might want change, but they don't have it. They're used to it. They work there. Do you know what I mean? They do it. But to us here in the UK, I can understand why people struggle with that. And to my mind, I kind of think, well, we don't have it so bad, so why do we need an extra bank holiday?
I just think if you have the opportunity to just have one more, it just makes the difference. It gives people more of a chance to plan, you know, around how they're working, to add this additional bank holiday weekend to their existing... I can actually understand why. People just want things to look forward to break up the year. And I think if you can use something like 80 years since the end of the Second World War, then why not?
Well, I mean, yeah, but you say something to look forward to, but then there were also calls for when Her Late Majesty died, that people were calling for an extra bank holiday to mark her reign. Maybe I'm just being a spoilsport.
Any excuse.
I think I just like work, you know. I think, you know, when you're very lucky. Was it Confucius who said, if you do a job you love, you never do a day's work in your life? I'm very lucky.
Amen.
So... Anyway, let's move on to the... Oh, dear, The Guardian. We've got any hand sanitizer. Right, let's move on to The Guardian.
BA.
Right, let's have a look and see here. Right, revealed Thames Water diverted clean-up cash to help pay bonuses. Now, it has to be said that if this is the case, then no one will convince me, whether I read The Guardian or not, that this is anything less than disgusting. But Thames Water intentionally diverted millions of pounds pledged for environmental clean-ups towards other costs, including bonuses and dividends, The Guardian can reveal. Now, if that is indeed the case, outrageous behaviour.
Thames Water are already under so much scrutiny. And if and as you said, in this case, this is abhorrent. To siphon off water to clean up, to go to bonuses, that's absolutely incredible. What can you say? I mean,
I have to say, one thing I do have to say is that on at least the front page anyway, that there isn't a statement by Thames Water. I'm sure Thames Water would deny the accusation, but The Guardian makes it all the same, and they have made it on their front page. So who knows if it is true or not? I am saying if it is, not okay. Not least of all because that money was obviously allocated for a very specific purpose and a very controversial purpose at that. You know, any company that does allow waste and sewage into our water that obviously, yes, we know obviously is going to be cleaned up before it becomes consumed. We know that. But the point that it's allowed to sort of happen at such a rate in the first place is pretty abhorrent, because obviously it just means it leads to more chemical treatment.
Yeah.
And subsequently, you know, actually the prices go up, because obviously the more chemical treatment that's needed, the more investment into cleaning up that water is needed. So the more investment needed in cleaning up that water, the prices go up. It stands to reason. It's a very vicious circle. Whereas actually, if the waters were kept clean in the first place, I sound like an environmentalist here, but it's just kind of logical sense.
Well, yes.
If the waters were kept cleaner in the first place, it wouldn't be quite as necessary.
Be so high. No, exactly. Exactly, yeah. It says that it told the regulator that it would not deliver 98 of 826 schemes under the Water Industry National Environment Programme. During the 5-year window it had promised, the delivery of these projects, which include schemes to reduce phosphorus pollution in rivers, was a key justification for how much Thames was allowed to spend.
Now, can we please focus on something that's slightly more positive news on the front page of The Guardian for Tuesday?
You're not talking about Trump then? Okay.
I am not talking about Trump. I'm talking about how NHS to trial AI tool able to spot risk of diabetes. So the NHS in England is launching a world-first trial of a quote-unquote game-changing artificial intelligence tool that can identify patients at risk of type 2 diabetes. The type 2 diabetes is the one that develops normally through dietary habits. Type 1 is genetic. It means that you'll be born with it. It's an inherent condition. There's not very much you can do about that, sadly, other than just simply treat it and hope that your life is as normal as can be as a result of it. Anyway, so this is patients at risk of type 2 diabetes more than a decade before they develop the actual condition. So extraordinary, really. I mean, if this is actually the case, that you potentially we're talking about up to 10 years beforehand that someone will be able to determine whether or not they are at risk of becoming diabetic. I can see why they think it's game-changing.
Yes, it would be amazing. That'll be a useful thing for AI, because a lot of things I'm seeing about AI at the moment are not very useful.
Well, look, OK, so I think AI gets a very bad rap. And I don't think it's always fair, because I have often spoken about, I think, the pros and cons of AI. And actually, in exactly the same way with our little discussion we had earlier on about who should have the right to vote, and I said about how potentially how dangerous it can be, I've said exactly the same thing, funnily enough, with AI, and I've compared it to the same way that you wouldn't just... If you imagine AI to be a knife, OK?
Yes.
If put into the right hands... A knife can carve something beautiful. It can make food and it can please people in that sense, OK?
I can see this analogy, yeah,
You wouldn't give anybody a knife, OK? If it goes into the wrong hands, a knife can do a lot of harm. I think we know that, right?
Yes.
Not rocket science. Well, I think exactly the same of AI. I think if AI is in the right hands, it could be used for an awful lot of good, and we should celebrate it. We should be so happy that we live in a day and age where artificial intelligence is within our lifetime, and we will get to see the benefits from it. However, if you then start allowing people access to AI who, let's be honest, will abuse it and use it for very, well, unsavoury purposes, shall we say, I think that's a very polite way of putting it, then I think that that would be a major problem. And not to say that actually what we should be doing is we should be licensing AI. We should be saying that if someone wants to be able to use it, to develop it, and to actually have the permission to use it for whatever purpose then, I think they should be licensed, because then we'll be able to trace who's done what with it.
Yes, as opposed to using your face without your permission.
Absolutely.
Or even your voice.
Well, quite. Let's move on to the Daily Telegraph, just because we're slightly tight for time. And we'll say that the Royal Mail accused of faking deliveries.
Oh, another company that's like Thames Water, which has been under complete scrutiny.
So the subheading reads, managers tell postmen to lie, quote unquote, about parcels in order to hit targets for bonus payouts. Now, like, again, I don't have Royal Mail's answer to hand, so we obviously have to treat this with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But this is what the Daily Telegraph says all the same, and I have to say, if it is true, it just goes to show why I hate targets, to be honest.
Yeah, but all these companies have targets. You know, I feel sorry for these poor delivery guys who have to go out and deliver a certain amount of drop-offs within an hour, which means that they sometimes just have to fling a parcel to your door, take a picture of it and run off because they have these targets to meet. It's really unfair on them, and I know they're caught between a rock and a hard place, and Royal Mail is under such scrutiny, as we said, but it really is like if managers are telling postmen to lie, then the pressure is coming from like top down in order to make these targets. It's not right, but if they're backed into a corner and they've got to do this because they're already under scrutiny, then unfortunately it happens.
Okie doke. Also on the front page of the Daily Mail, on the Daily Telegraph, sorry, fears over Fresh Reeves tax rate as growth stalls. Ebbs, it's been an absolute treat. Can I take this moment to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year? And here's hoping that we get other opportunities to speak to each other on the paper review and then some here on Talk, Home of Common Sense. Efe Akintade, broadcaster, thank you very much. Right, now it's time for me to tell you what is coming up after midnight here on Talk, because in the next hour, it's over to you. Gracious me, I sounded like Lloyd Grossman then, didn't I? Anyway, however, rights to vote, firstly, it's over to you. Rights to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds will be included in elections bill next year. The Commons leader has suggested who should be allowed to vote. That is my question to you. Should there be any terms and conditions attached to that? I will give you all the contact information, but I want you to join in that discussion. So make sure you stay right here on the Home of Common Sense. That and your calls coming up right after this.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on the far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. It has just gone 2 minutes past midnight. Yes, the midnight hour. It's your chance to have your say. This is Phil Dave in for Petrie Hoskin with you until 1 a.m. this morning. And I would absolutely love to get you involved in this programme, because this programme does exist for you. Well, certainly this hour does anyway, because we're going to be talking about a subject that I have very little doubt everyone has an opinion on, OK? So there's no excuse. Make a note of the phone number, 0344 499 1000. Don't forget those calls are charged at national rate. And what I want to talk to you about is who should have the right to vote? Who should be allowed to vote? And the reason why I'm asking you this is because the right to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds will be included in an elections bill next year. This is apparently according to the Commons leader, who's sort of basically indicated this. Well, I say yesterday, it's now day before yesterday, Sunday, wasn't it? So, yeah, so Lucy Powell said that the government would likely bring forward legislation in the next parliamentary session which will include Labour's manifesto pledge to lower the voting age. So what does that mean? Well, I was speaking to Efe Akintade. We'll maybe hear a bit of that in a moment, but I was speaking to Efe Akintade a little earlier on this evening. And so the reason why, well, what I mentioned is that I said, I feel as though that most people at the age of 16 and 17 would not be mentally developed enough to be able to make such a life-changing vote, really. And it is. I know people are going to turn to me and they're going to say, don't be ridiculous, for goodness sake. If it's one vote, how can one vote be so powerful? But actually, as we know, collective votes can make a massive difference. They can sway the vote one way or another. You know, why on earth do you think tactical voting exists? And I believe that if you're going to allow 16 and 17-year-olds, who don't, let's be honest, I think most 16 and 17-year-olds don't really care too much about politics. Not that there's anything wrong with that, by the way. I'm not having a go at them for it. I just personally don't think they do, and I don't really see why it matters if they do. For goodness sake, what happens to let children be children? Why don't we do that? I actually even thought, I was saying to Ebbs earlier, I think at the age of 18, I'm not completely convinced that I felt I was mature enough. Well, I've mentioned Ebbs so many times, I think it's only fair, actually, we should also hear what he had to say. So I asked Efe Akintade what he thought of introducing sort of an aptitude test, I suppose is the way of putting it, really. Yeah, because I also think as well people should be examined. I think they should actually be tested, regardless of age, before they're given the chance to vote. So we'll hear what he has to say about whether or not he agrees or disagrees with that thought.
I think, if anything, if you're going to try and examine people before they vote, that could in itself act as a deterrent, because that could stop them from thinking, well, actually, I just want to have the freedom to vote. If you're going to start testing me on my freedom to vote, then you're doubting my respectability as a voter. So I should just be free to vote regardless of what anyone thinks. It's my vote, it's my responsibility, and I know what I'm doing. And I will pay the consequences. I think it's many levels, it's a democracy. You can't say, or maybe you can say, that, you know, people are now less intelligent when voting. People are as intelligent as they've always been.
Oh, I don't know. It might be.
What skews?
But it may be, to be fair, successive government's fault that they are. I'm just saying.
Yes, but also with the rise of, I heard you talking about it in the last hour, the rise of AI, with the rise of social media, and people being swayed a certain way in terms of how they vote, they also have an impact in terms of how people are voting. So it's not necessarily down to the individual, it's down to the news that's being fed to them, whether it's for big old elections like the presidential election over in the US, whether it's down to our elections. People are swayed and can be a bit brainwashed by what they see on social media.
Well, there you go. That is what broadcaster Efe Akintade had to say on the subject. But what do you have to say about it? My question to you, I think, is actually perfectly simple, but possibly with a very complicated answer. Who should be allowed to vote? And also, should there be any terms and conditions attached to that vote? So my terms and conditions, I think people need to be tested for their ability to realise what a vote would mean for themselves and the great British public. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. Do get in touch and let me know what you think. You can also text 87222, start your message with the word talk. And of course, you can send us a WhatsApp, whether it be a voice message or a traditional message, text message, to 0344 499 1000. So it's the same number for WhatsApp as it is to phone in. And also tweet as well, at talkTV, at Mr. Phil Day. Right, that's enough from me. Let's find out what you think, because this hour exists for you. So let's go to you. Let's start off with, it's Linda in London. Linda, a very good morning to you.
Hello.
Hi, Linda. What would you like to say? What is it? Who should be allowed to vote? Let's go straight to it. Who should be allowed?
I think we've got it right. I don't think we need to change anything.
So you think the voting age should stay at 18?
I do, but I haven't always thought that way. In fact, when I was younger, I was actually involved quite politically to try and get that changed to 16 to 18, but I don't feel like that anymore.
Interesting. So what changed?
So at the time, my kind of backstory, I'll be very brief, is relevant to why I was so politically motivated at such a young age. Grew up in the care system at 16, kicked out, had to live on my own, had to, work because obviously, I had to live, so I had to pay taxes. I was kind of left to fend for myself. And also back then, education and training wasn't compulsory like it is now till 18. Plus also back then, you could buy lottery tickets, you could buy cigarettes, it was very kind of a grey area. The 16 to 18 was very grey area as to whether you were seen as an adult or not. But I think now most things have come up to the age of 18, with the exception of driving, I think, and the legal age of consent for a sexual relationship. I actually don't think.
Well, yeah, but let's not forget.
Now.
I think legal age of consent, though, only between the ages of 16 to 18, if you see what I mean. So I think.
No.
Oh, has that changed?
Not.
I beg your pardon.
No, it's never changed. So anyone over the age of 16 can legally give consent if they're considered of sound mind. Obviously, we have to ask if it's morally questionable if somebody is a lot older than the 16-year-old. But no, unfortunately, it is actually legal.
Right. Okay, I understand. I'm delighted to say that having never contemplated such an age gap, I don't fully understand these things. So
I actually think it should raise to 18. I think everything should be 18 so that we don't
I do as
have
well,
this
and I
grey
tell you
area.
why.
Yeah.
Because for me, I just have to think back to what I was like at the age of 16. Now, I am perfectly aware that I completely understand that not everyone was like me at the age of 16. Funnily enough, we're all different. I completely understand that. But what I do believe is that people should realise that at the age of 16, the chances someone is still developing both physically and mentally is quite a high probability, right? I think we could all agree with that, can't we? Because actually, most people actually even develop beyond the age of 18. But so I don't understand sort of why anyone would think that such a life-altering decision, such as being allowed to go out and put your cross next to whatever political representative, let's be honest, most people wouldn't even know who their political representative is at any age, let alone at the age of 16.
Do you know, that was my next point about what you said about to be tested to see if they know what their vote means. But let's be honest, the vast majority of people that don't know what their vote would mean anyway probably are completely disengaged and don't vote anyway.
I have to tell you, it has not gone down very well, my suggestion, by the way, of testing beforehand, because I've got a message here from Janet. Okay, well, I believe it's Janet. It says, brain dead idea. And I have to tell you, she's sort of explained why I do think the way I do, because idea is spelt I-D-E-A-R. Not quite. I think you mean idea is in I-D-E-A, but let's not dwell on that too much. It's fine. Brain dead idea, that's, without an apostrophe, that's like saying you should be tested before you get married. You're so stupid. Wow. Well, I'm going to level with you, Janice, if that is your name. I mean, of course, it could be an alias. I don't really know, but I'm going to go with Janet on the basis I've got nothing else. Having read your fascinating message, I put it to me, it's probably not me who's stupid, but let's keep going anyway. All the same, Linda, that's just one reaction. So, look, I mean, I stand by it. I say that, look, it's a very dangerous business, and I use the word dangerous quite a few times. It's a very dangerous business to vote because it can change, it can affect millions of people's lives.
But then we're going down a route of saying, so who decides that? Who decides what that test would be, and who decides what the answer is? That's my first thing. And secondly, are we then going to get into a position where people that, maybe aren't particularly academic, I'm not academic, I would possibly have sent a text, well, not quite like that, but my spelling's awful. But actually, I'm very politically engaged.
No, but all right,
I know what's going on.
It's not about, listen, to be honest with you, my spelling is atrocious as well, Linda, so please don't worry about it. And I'm not in the least bit academic, actually. In fact, on the contrary, I actually managed to shock quite a few of my colleagues before when I told them that I actually left school at the age of 15 because school and I just didn't get on. Yeah. So believe me, it absolutely is not the case that I think one has to be an academic.
What would your question be? How would you determine whether somebody knew their purpose of their vote and what it actually meant? What would the question be?
All right. Well, I think one very simple example is who is in charge of the Exchequer, for example.
Well, to be honest, if it was under the Conservatives, things like that changed every 5 minutes.
No. But the answer, of course, is the Chancellor, right? So that's the point, you know? So I'd actually sort of say it's if one has a basic understanding of how politics works, I'd say that should be more than enough to determine someone is able.
If people don't have a basic understanding, then they're not voting. Anyway.
I don't agree. I think there'll be some people who just follow blindly, won't they? You know, there'll be others who just sort of say... I don't know. Listen, if there is someone in someone's family, for example... I'm just giving you an example. I know this is very hypothetical, but it's a thought. If, let's just say hypothetically, there is someone who says... Right, OK, I know politics is not your thing, but you've got the vote, and I'd be really grateful if you could go out and put your cross next to this political party because it would really help what I believe in. That's not voting fairly. That's ridiculous. That's basically taking advantage.
How many people are doing that?
I don't know. I really don't know. That's what I'm saying. I'm just using that as an example.
A lot of people under the age of 25 tend to vote for who their parents vote for. So by that logic...
Absolutely. But that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point, is I'm saying I want people to have a good understanding of what their vote means. If nothing, you never know, actually. It could work against me from that sense, because, you know, if I happen to like the political party that's in power, I don't, but I'm just saying if I happen to like the political party that's in power, and this potentially then dilutes the strength of which that party has to then potentially get in next time round, or even in by-elections or local elections, whatever it might be, then I'm possibly shooting myself in the foot. I'm just saying...
we're going down the route of disengaging probably already very disengaged people and disengaging them further, and I don't think that's helpful for society as a whole.
Well, look, let's just say that. What is the answer when it comes to re-engaging people with politics? Because I think by actually getting them fired up and actually getting a vested interest in it, I can't think of a better way to re-engage people. And I believe that actually by putting people to the test to say, look, you know what? This is how much I appreciate politics because I have a good understanding of it. I think that's the best way to get people engaged and actually force them into actually understanding what the political system is about.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
I'll cope with a maybe, Linda. I'll cope with a maybe.
Well, I'm really just going to say Happy Christmas.
Oh,
anyway.
Thank you so much. And thank you very much as well for phoning in. But happy Christmas to you and yours. It's Linda in London. I'm really sorry. I only cut it short just for time reasons because I want to get as many calls on as we possibly can. So thank you very much indeed for that. Janet has messaged back to say that just because my spelling is bad, she says that I'm not the stupid one because... OK, and then goes on to use examples of other billionaires who can't spell. I'm not really sort of suggesting that just because someone can't spell they are stupid. It was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but clearly you've taken it a little bit too seriously. I'm just saying if you're going to accuse me of being stupid, maybe doing it with bad spelling is not the best way to go around it. Anyway, don't want to go down that particular rabbit hole. The rabbit hole I want to go down, who should be allowed to vote and why? That is what I'm asking you this evening. It's Phil Dave in for Petri Hoskin. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This.
It's 19 minutes past midnight. A very good morning to you. This is Phil Dave in for Petrie with you until 1 o'clock this morning. And we're taking your calls on the subject that honestly has got so many people flapping right now, but I completely understand why. And I actually kind of understand more perspective than I'm letting on, if I'm honest. Right to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds will be included in elections bill next year, the Commons leader has suggested. So I want you to tell me who should be allowed to vote. And whether or not there should be any terms and conditions attached to that, by the way, as well. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number to call in, and it's also the number to send your WhatsApp message to as well. Remember, those calls are going to be charged at national rate, and you can also text 87222, start your message with the word talk, and a message will be one standard network rate message. Now, Cindy in Michigan has been waiting very patiently. Cindy, I will be with you in just a tick. I just want to blast through a couple of messages because they've also come through as well, and I don't want to drown in messages, do I? Let's have a look and see if Andrew in Salisbury says here, I can guarantee if you lower the voting age, the same people would want the age of consent lowered to 14. Interesting. It's true. It's kind of about how people are never really satisfied. There has to be a cut-off at some point. 18 has served this country for many, many years as the cut-off point for the voting age. I really don't see why we want to change that. Thank you for that, Andrew. Great point. 87222, start your message with the word talk. This one here comes from, let's have a look, Sarah, who says, she's Sarah in Worthing. Anyone under a certain age allowed to vote is introducing TikTok politics. Yeah, very good point. That's how a lot of people obviously find their politics now. That's why we are in this woke mess already. Works in Keir's favour, keeps reform out. Sarah, thank you very much indeed for that. I think that what Sarah is making the point there is that she's actually saying, she's not saying keep reform out, she is saying that by lowering the voting age, it keeps reform out of politics. Or at least I believe that she implies that that is what Sir Keir Starmer would hope would happen. Though it is fascinating to see how parties such as Reform have actually had a surge amongst the youth in recent months. And it's almost as if those who are younger are going more over to the right of politics. Fascinating. Let's have a look very quickly at this one here from Pamela. It says, totally agree, Phil. 16 is far too young to vote unless politics was part of the education system. People need a good understanding of politics before they can even think about policies. And that was the point I'm trying to make. You need to test their abilities. You need to see whether or not someone has an understanding of what their vote means. Right, Cindy is in Michigan in the USA. Cindy, a very good evening to you, isn't it?
Oh, hi, Phil Dave. I want to say something really, really, really short to the person who thinks you're stupid.
Oh,
anyone who watches, and anyone who watches Talk TV knows that you're the most eloquent, sophisticated
that's very kind. Thank you.
person ever.
Oh,
so,
thanks.
Yeah.
That's good. That's one for the show reel. Thanks.
They're new to Talk TV.
Yeah. One has to hope so, don't they? Well, at least if nothing else, they might be new to me. Cindy, to be fair, I'm not on very often, so it's possible they're new to my way of thinking. So one way or another, I've always said I will always defend people's right to have whatever opinion they want. It just might be that they're challenged. That's all. Cindy, you are characteristically bouncy. Which is superb. I'm just wondering what I'm hearing in the background, though. It sounds like there's a bit of noise going on, so I'm just hoping you haven't got the radio on, because you are a veteran caller now, frankly, and you should know better to have stuff on in the background.
No, there's nothing in the background.
Okay,
I think
maybe it's the line.
I was moving around.
Oh, I see.
That's probably it.
Oh, I see.
So,
okay.
yeah.
Well, I mean, far be it from me to encourage anyone to not move, but stay still. So let's.
But I'm not going to move. I'm not going to move for this because I'm excited to tell you what I think. It's not going to be popular, but I think the age should be raised only because our brains aren't formed until we're about 26, 27.
Okay. So when you say the age to be raised, so actually what you're saying is that 18 is not even old enough to vote. Is that right?
No, far from.
Goodness.
Yeah, I think it should be about 23, at least 23, because
23,
your brain,
my goodness me, okay.
Your brain isn't formed until about 27 or so. So 23.
I'm going to level with you, Cindy. I'm still waiting for my brain to form, but yeah, absolutely. So, and I'm long past 27, but even so. But look, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I must admit, it's actually a view that I have said before as well, is I'm not convinced 18 is... I actually said it earlier this evening. I'm not convinced 18 years old is old enough. Now, whether or not that means I actually would actively campaign to see that voting age raised, I don't know. Let's look a bit at the American system, because obviously you're a very good barometer for us of what actually goes on in the US, because voting age in the US is...
I want to tell you. I would campaign for this, okay? But first I want to say terms and conditions would be such a massive turnoff that you would see a mass decline in voting. And I'd like to tell you a little something that I feel passionate and would campaign for. In the United States, you have what's called a civics class, okay? Right. And we take it in high school, which I'm not sure what that is for you, but this is like the last 3 years of school.
Yeah. Well, last 3 years of school in this country now has been raised to 18 as well. It used to be that you could leave school legally at the age of 16. But in this country now you have to be 18 to leave education.
You're about 15 or 16 when you take civics class. And
okay. So it's the same kind of thing. So the last 3 years of education.
Yes. And what civics class is they teach you about how your government works. Like here, we have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And you have the House of Representatives. They teach you about how it works in government, like how to pass a bill, how to, veto a bill, who can veto it, things like that, so that you understand, okay, this is how it works.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with it, and that's what I want. I genuinely want to see something like that here. Even if the answer is, by the way, and possibly a more sensible alternative, is whether or not that there is some sort of introduction to politics in the education, in the curriculum, if there's actually proper introduction to how the political system... Now, I'm not talking about who to vote for, okay, because I think we get a lot of that already. No. This is much more about what your vote would mean. So let's just say, hypothetically, you put a cross next to a political... But first of all, some people might not even know you have to put a cross. It really is as simple as that. It could be that because how many ballot papers do we hear about that are spoiled? And the reason they're spoiled is because they've not been marked properly. They might not actually know you have to put a cross. Some people might know that it's done with pencil, not pen. It's really silly things like that people might not know how you vote in this country.
That's so right. Phil, Dave, you always blow my mind.
Well, that's very kind. I get that reaction a lot, yeah.
Yeah, you're saying what I'm going to say next.
Oh, yes.
Because that is true. That is very true. Ballots are spoiled all the time by those little things. And we need to know when we're young ahead of time, because people, when they get 18, 19, 20, they're not going to have time, and they're not going to want to look up the way their government works, and it's so important to know. You need
I just feel as though that people learn through osmosis. It's not because they actually know. And by the way, anyone was asking what the hell are you talking about? Sorry. When I say osmosis, I just basically mean they learn by proxy. They learn from other people, right? They pick up along the way bits of information. They kind of piece it together a bit like a jigsaw puzzle in their mind and say, okay, well, that's my understanding of politics. That's what it must be. Whereas actually, if it was introduced in the curriculum and categorically there was something that was taught to all of us at an age of education that says this is how politics works, this is what you should be doing with your vote in terms of not who you should be voting for, how you should make your decision about who you're voting for. I personally believe it would make a massive difference. And then to actually test someone in later life to make 100% sure they understand what their vote could mean to them and to the wider society, I personally think there is an awful lot to discuss there and an awful big argument behind it. Cindy in Michigan, I'm only going to move on for no other reason than I want to try and squeeze in as many calls as possible. You know it's such a treat to speak to you always. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to call 0344 499 1000 and have yourself a very Merry Christmas. Right, more of your calls going to be coming up in just a moment's time. Let's read some more of these messages, shall we, that are coming in, because Grant in Weymouth says, "Hi, Phil." Hi, Grant. "I think you are wrong. If they had a test to see who could be eligible to vote, any age, how many will be excluded?" Well, that's kind of my point, is I'm kind of suggesting that there should be some who actually might be excluded, to be honest with you. The age is just a silly talking point by Labour. Who has the knowledge or right to tell anyone they can't vote because they don't meet an imaginary intelligence to vote? Taking it to the extreme, how about women, gay guys and left-handed people can't vote? Just as stupid and silly. Have a fantastic Christmas, Grant in Weymouth. Well, Grant, look, thank you for your point. And you know, I have always said, if I've said so many times, that I welcome all opinions. That is your opinion. And might I suggest, you know, thank you for it. I do appreciate it. I don't agree. I think you actually can tell people that their vote, if they use it wrongly, and I don't mean wrongly in terms of vote for the wrong party, I mean make a decision that is not very well informed, purely based out of either ignorance or lack of willingness to understand what that vote does to this country. I think it's dangerous. I believe it is ultimately putting a paper weapon into the wrong hands. It is something that could ultimately affect all of our lives and possibly not in a very good way. So it may well be that there are an awful lot of quote-unquote silly people who vote in the same way I do. It doesn't mean I'm silly. It may be detrimental to my way of thinking and my political stance, but at least I'd know that there has been some sort of intelligent and informed decision made before putting that cross to paper. And that's my point. I just think it is such a massive decision. Why? Why should people be allowed to have that decision in their hands when they don't even know what their decision means? 0344 499 1000. Who should be allowed to vote? Should there be any terms and conditions to it? You've heard my terms and conditions. My terms and conditions are very clear, I think. It's a case of there should be some sort of test to show ability to comprehend what you are doing and how you are voting. But I also think that lowering the voting age to the age of 16 personally is a very daft idea. I have always said that. I've always thought it. I will never change that. In fact, if anything, I almost agree with Cindy when I say that raising the voting age, in my mind's eye, makes more sense. 0344 499 1000. Let me know your thoughts. Get in touch. More of your calls next here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. It is 26 minutes. No, is it 26? Yes, 26. I don't even know what time it is now. 26 minutes to 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why I bother, honestly. You should hear some of the conversations that go off air. It's thank goodness the mics are down, because I'm telling you, I would be, not just me, we would be fired. Oh, apparently the mics were up the whole time, so you heard it anyway. That wasn't a matter. Right, OK, more of your messages coming through. Robert, by the way, in the East Midlands, I'm going to come to your call in just a second, so I don't think I have forgotten. And Lisa here says, I agree with you, Phil. Well, Lisa, what can I say? You've got common sense. Well done. And we think you are great. Lots of love, Lisa and Bobby. Lisa and Bobby, that's very kind of you. Have yourself a very, very happy Christmas and a splendid new year. Thank you. And let's have a look at this one here from Lindsay. It's just come in. It says, let's discuss the elephant in the room. Where? Oh, I see. Right, sorry. Elephant in the room. Labour are banking on the Muslim vote, as their parents would ensure they register at 16 and voted and do as they're told. Lindsay, I'm going to level with you. I think that's a little bit far-fetched, but that's your opinion. You're welcome to it. The white British are less likely to vote or register at 16. This is a ridiculous idea born from securing Labour's dictatorship. Now, one thing I think we can agree on is that it is definitely born out of the idea that Labour believe, by being the party that give younger people the right to vote, that they will somehow vote for them because they've been given that vote by them, if you see what I mean. What they actually probably don't appreciate is that there is this surge in younger people voting more towards the right of politics, which is quite extraordinary, really, if you think about it, especially if we've had supposedly a right-of-centre government for the last Conservative Party. I mean, I say right of centre, you could have fooled me, but allegedly that's what they are. Anyway, I digress. Keep your messages coming in. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number, but it's also the number to WhatsApp, 87222. Send your message with the word talk at the beginning, and just remember those calls are charged at national rate, and those text messages will cost you one standard network rate message. Right, that's all the legal bit stuff. Robert in the East Midlands, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Phil. It's nice to speak to you.
It's nice to speak to you as well. Thank you for phoning. Now, look, Robert, what do you make of this? Because it's I don't think that this is a black and white decision, you know, because I'm actually not convinced on whether or not we should lower the age to 16 or 17. I just haven't heard anything to persuade me that yes is the answer.
Okay. Well, no, the point I was... excuse me. It's very rare that anything's a black and white decision. But if you just consider that most young people, 16, 17... let's just put this scenario forward. So they're unable to vote, yet within maybe a year, 2 years, they could be conscripted, and that it's quite all right to send them off into a war, that they're actually unable to vote as to whether they get sent to that war or what happens about that war, for example. So I think also lumping all 16 and 17-year-olds into this ludicrousness about the brain not being developed. I mean, my goodness, it's not actually as old as 27, as Cindy said.
No, I must admit, I thought 27 did sound a bit far-fetched. But I just don't know the answer to that. But I think it's actually... But, Robert, I think that's the point. Robert, I think that's the point. Robert, I think that's the point, is that there is actually no definitive age. It doesn't mean that just because one person has reached the age of, say, 24, 25, whatever, suddenly, right, everyone's developed now, so they must know what they're talking about. That's the whole thing, is everyone goes at their own pace, right?
But my whole point is, I think we underestimate young people. I mean...
some, not all.
As I said to your researcher, they're arguably the best educated generation we've ever had. They've got access to lots of information. The exams they take are probably very, very rigorous. And I know we could talk about exam inflation and all that kind of thing. My point is that the pressures young people are under, I think they should be entitled to vote at a slightly younger age. Simply because I think something else that needs to happen as well, and Cindy touched on this, about, what happens in North America. I think politics should become a compulsory part of the curriculum from age, from year 7. I think it should be taught properly. I think the history of politics in this country should be taught properly. Maybe when children get to sort of 13, they learn about other political cultures. I think this is where the system is flawed, because look at the mess we're in at the moment. Look at the mess of Brexit. And using that age argument,
that's politicians messing it up rather than voters, but yes.
No, but this is what I'm saying. You know, I think there are people in their 50s and 60s who are not informed enough to vote. I think it's such a stupid thing to sort of say, oh yeah, somebody, you know, and you sort of hinted at that.
But that's exactly the point I was making, Robert. That's exactly the point I was making. That's precisely why I have said several times throughout this programme that I think people should be tested on their ability to know whether or not they fully appreciate what their vote will mean. And that's exactly my point.
That's difficult, though, isn't it? That's difficult.
Well, it may be, but let's be honest, the current system arguably doesn't work very well either for a lot of people.
No, it hasn't worked for decades. No, I totally agree with you. It hasn't worked for decades. And let's think, you know, I mean, I don't really want to get drawn away from this point of, you know, I strongly feel that if young people were taught, I mean, there are some nothing against faith or anything, and nothing against people's personal faith, but I personally think politics is a far more useful thing for people to learn than RE. You know, I mean...
Well, okay, so I do and I don't.
Everybody's life.
Yeah, no, I do and I don't. The only reason why, and I'm speaking, by the way, as just as someone who comes from a minority background here, so, right, bear with me, right? I completely understand why it would mean that politics would be very useful. I actually think politics is more useful than something like, say, trigonometry, right? That's where I'd argue it's more useful.
No, I kind of disagree there. I think
no worries at all, but that would be my perspective. As much as I understand why people find religious education pointless in a day and age where many people are actually turning to not having a religion at all,
I'm not saying it's pointless. Don't get me wrong.
No, but I know many people... No, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying I know many people do. Okay, I know many people think that religious education is pointless when a lot of people don't have a religion. The reason why I would argue that it is necessary is because, unfortunately, one of the biggest causes of hate crimes towards people from minority background is a lack of understanding of why that person does what they do based on their religion.
Okay.
So that's the only reason I'd argue slightly against that. But I do understand why people think like that.
I totally agree with you there, but unfortunately, I have worked in education, and I'm not going to name any faith here, but in the years I worked in education, it was over a decade, there was one particular faith that didn't allow their children to learn about other faiths, and I'm not going to say.
No, I think people can draw conclusions of that.
This happened repeatedly. Every year that I was in education, in
absolutely.
the schools I worked in. So that kind of undermines this argument of learning about how others think. I mean, but that's another
fortunately, just on that very point, though, Robert, on that very point. Fortunately, sorry, this is a conversation. Hang on. Look, fortunately, on that very point. The bottom line is that it is not necessarily up to the parents to decide what goes into the curriculum. They might protest in the strongest about something that is being taught to their child, but it is not ultimately up to them to decide that curriculum. Anyway, I feel like you're rightly right. We're sort of probably moving away from the subject here. So let's go back more to the conversation in hand about how educated, in inverted commas, someone should be before they're actually allowed to vote.
Sorry, Phil, there was a certain faith group, anyway, and then we'll move on. There was a certain faith group that repeatedly pulled their children from lessons unless it was about their faith. And
I'm aware. This actually was sort of something that was covered in news. I'm aware exactly what you're talking about.
Undermines that argument about learning about other people's values, etc. Anyway,
it undermines it, but only by those who are not willing to learn. But anything could be undermined by someone not willing to learn. I'm not talking about people who aren't willing.
My point is, this was only one particular faith group that did this. In my experience.
That's exactly it, in your experience, but yes.
But, you know...
Anyway, look, Robert, we're rapidly running out of time, and I really want to get to the point here, so let's get back on track with the subject here. So, in terms of...
Politics, I personally think politics should be taught, as I say, you know, absolutely thoroughly, so young people know, because I don't know, I confess to be ignorant about much of politics, so young people know the processes, young people know... you know, the laws, why they're there, perhaps the history of the laws, the processes of becoming an MP, which, you know, that, because I do think the quality of MPs has lessened a little over the last 2 decades, definitely.
A little. I think, Robert, that is probably the understatement of the entire show. I think it's lessened extraordinarily, and sadly, for the absolute worst. Anyway, but Robert, in the East Midlands, I'm only cutting there just because of time, but I really am truly grateful to you for your call. Thank you. That was a great discussion. You can get involved as well. 0344 499 1000 is the phone number. There's still time. Come on, you must have an opinion on this. Who do you think should be allowed to vote, and should there be any terms and conditions attached to that? 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Right to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds will be included in election bills, or as an elections bill next year, the Commons leader has suggested. And I want to know from you whether or not you think there is anyone in particular who should or should not be allowed to vote, and if so, why? 0344 499 1000, text 87222, start your message with the word talk, and you can also tweet. It's at Mr. Phil Dave. That's Phil with one L, by the way, at Mr. Phil Dave and at talkTV. Your messages, your calls, and possibly even some more of my ranting coming next here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Final stretch of this programme. My goodness me, where's that gone? It's Phil Dave in for Petri Huskin with you until 1 a.m. this morning, so we have 12 minutes left together. I very much hope that you will listen. If you've lasted this long, you might as well stick around for the last bit, right? And even if you've just tuned in, you're very welcome. It is an absolute delight to have your company. And we've been taking your calls this morning, by the way, on whether or not you believe that, well, really it's more about who should have the right to vote. Because the story du jour is that 16 and 17-year-olds will be included in elections bill, or in an elections bill, I should say, next year. That's according to the Commons leader. So I thought it might be worth asking whether or not, A, do you agree with that? And if not, why not? Better still, actually, do we just take for granted that everyone over the age of 18 has got the right to vote? Well, actually, maybe they shouldn't. This comes from Martin in Peterborough. If a 16-year-old is not considered to be responsible enough to do things an 18-year-old can do, how can they be responsible to vote in a government? As for the general population, many think that we vote the Prime Minister into office, not the party. It's very true, they do actually. Very often, people will make their decision based on the Prime Minister, potentially, or the potential, I should say, the Prime Minister in waiting, if it is, rather than actually voting for that party. Or, of course, the local MP, which is who you are voting for. That's exactly what it is. It's obviously just the collection of MPs determines who will be the Prime Minister. Anyway, let's not get into that now, because Hayley is in Yorkshire, and she's given a call, and I want to hear what Hayley has to say. Hayley, a very good morning to you.
Hi, Phil.
Hello there, Hayley. Thank you very much indeed for calling. I hope that all is well with you. What would you like to say? You know, who should be allowed to vote?
I absolutely agree with most of what you are saying.
Well, that's very kind, Hayley. Thank you.
People need to understand what they're voting for, who they are voting for, and why. My local MP is Ed Miliband. That's true. That is absolutely true.
Right.
The majority of people around here did not turn out to vote, but they don't understand it. But I do agree with what you are saying. They do sort of need to be tested, but I don't think tested. It needs to be taught in schools from a very early age.
I think that's right. Most people can, if they want to look up local MPs and determine who's in what area they can do. Might I suggest, though, Hayley, that obviously in the absence of Mr. Miliband being here to answer anything that we're throwing him, I know you're not throwing anything at him per se. I'm just saying that I'm not really interested in local politicians at this. What I'm talking about is whether or not there is something wrong with the way that people learn what their vote will actually do. I think a lot of people don't learn what their vote means. So what I've said a few times, and I'll say it again just because I think it's worthwhile mentioning,
that's what I'm saying.
I believe that people need to understand the power behind their vote. And that also, by the way, that also includes anyone who, as you were saying just now about quite a low turnout. I think it was low turnout across the general election. I think it wasn't really anything unique to your area or your constituency. I think it actually was the case that right across, a lot of people did. I think it was something ridiculous, like 34% of the country voted for the government we actually have. Isn't that mad? 34%, something like that.
We are in a very, very deprived area.
Yeah, so it's extraordinary, really, to think like that.
And honestly, a lot of the women around this area don't even understand politics or don't even know when election day is. So
well, I mean, you say a lot of women. I just don't think a lot of people, full stop, you know, actually understand the kind of potential that their vote has. And I feel as though that I primarily blame the education system. That's the most obvious place. System. Yeah, it's the most obvious place to turn.
Gambling, economics, all of it. It's all in the grassroots.
Yeah, it's certainly the most obvious place to turn, because as much as it's very simple to turn around and say, oh, well, if their families never taught them, well, then how can they be successful? No, well, what if their families were never taught? You know, I work in a job that happens to need quite a good understanding of politics and political systems. Now, that's just because it's my choice. I've always been fascinated by news and politics, and therefore that was kind of obvious why I wound up doing the kind of job I'm doing. You know, for those who don't know, when I'm not on air, I work off air here at Talk. So I do quite a lot behind the scenes. So when I do that, it still means I need a half-decent understanding of news and politics. And it's just something I've always been very interested in. However, just because I am doesn't mean other people are. But what I'm getting at is that that's exactly the point. I've got a reason, an actual vested interest as to why I should learn more about politics and our system.
I agree with you.
Whereas people...
I'm a legal exec, family law, legal exec.
Yeah.
So I had to learn. I learned a lot in college.
Well, there you go. So therein lies my point. But then at the same time, I think it's important, Hayley, to stress that I'm not saying that just because someone hasn't been privileged to an education that would benefit them politically, that they should be excluded from voting. I'm saying I want to give people the tools to understand what their vote means. And that's the massive difference. I'm not saying that people should be banned just because they don't learn politics. I'm actually saying that we'd be able to determine who really knows what they're doing with their vote.
I've got an 18-year-old daughter that turned 18 for the last election.
So your daughter has voted in the last general election?
No, she didn't. She didn't go.
Oh, okay.
She weren't interested. Not interested whatsoever.
Did she say why she wasn't interested out of interest?
She said that it didn't matter to her.
Wow.
That was it. It was not even though I'm into it, she was not interested at all.
I think that's really sad. I mean, that's not about no dig at your daughter. You know, that's absolutely not attacking her. I just think it is sad that anyone who finally becomes of an age where they can vote, regardless if that's going to be 16 or whether it is obviously 18 at the moment, or heck, even if it one day increases, who knows? I just think it's a shame.
2 seconds, I've got a 22-year-old daughter, which would have been her first vote.
Yeah.
She's at university. She didn't even vote.
Goodness
not interested whatsoever. So this is what I'm saying. So when they say, oh, give 16-year-olds a vote, what they're going to do, waddle down and vote. I don't actually believe for a minute that any
Oh, no, I don't either. I'm completely with you in that. I don't think they will either. I actually don't believe that this is... And even if... I think it was some sort of survey done, if my memory serves me right, and this is coming off the top of my head, so forgive me if the numbers aren't absolutely accurate, but I do know it is out there somewhere. That there was a survey that was done that said something along the lines of that if 16 and 17-year-olds were given a vote, then it would only make a difference by about 1 million votes. Well, if that is the case, then
I don't even think that.
It wouldn't affect the vote at all, because there just wouldn't be a high enough concentration. There just wouldn't be a high enough concentration of that age bracket to sway the vote. So if that is the case, then actually this whole thing is irrelevant. You know, whatever. If they want to give 16, 17-year-olds the vote, who cares?
But if that's what they're going to try and do, change it, when they say, oh, well, people are looking at reform, the younger ones, or Keir Starmer's trying to change it this way, is it all just like a big thing for us all to just like get in a tizzy about? Because if I've got 2 daughters, which I was saying to them, you're women, you must try and have your vote, but then I look back when I was that age, and I don't think I even had my first vote before I was in my 30s.
Yeah. No, listen,
or cared.
Hayley, it is a fascinating discussion that, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not completely convinced that we're even going to get to the bottom of, because we're rapidly running out of time, unfortunately, but it's been a real treat to speak to you. Might I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to call 0344 499 1000. Well, there you go. That's pretty much it from me. But just before I go, I do want to take a little bit of time just to tell you about some of what is coming up here on Talk in the next couple of days. In particular, let's focus on the 25th. Let's focus on Christmas Day, shall we? Because there is so much amazing stuff happening on Christmas Day here on Talk that I absolutely don't want to miss a minute of it. It's very important. I don't want you to miss a minute of it either. So it's very, very important. To get the full schedule, you will need to go to talkTV, and then you'll see what you can listen to and everything like that, because there's quite a lot going on. But there's a lot of best-ofs. So what we're doing is we've compiled all of the best of all your favourite presenters here on Talk and put them all together in one great show. So there'll be the best of Morning Glory, the best of Julia Hartley-Brewer. There's also going to be a Plank of the Week Christmas special, but just a couple of other highlights that I'm really looking forward to as well. You've got Kevin Alley's TV Review of the Year. This is something I did last year, and it was absolutely superb. So if you missed it, I've got good news. Do it again, because Kevin Alley, when they're together, absolutely hilarious. So very much look forward to that. That, by the way, is on for the first time at 6 o'clock on Christmas Day. So make sure that you do have a listen. And then also that James Whale, this is going to be great. At 1 o'clock on Christmas Day, James Whale Unwrapped. It's a Christmas special with the Whale, right? The master of radio. So we very much look forward to what he has to do. And then for radio only, okay, so you won't be